and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the worshipful the Mayor.
Oh, sorry. That's another advantage of having a son by your side. Good evening, everybody. We'll start with prayers by my chaplain, Arthur Botham, Reverend Arthur Botham.
Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14 reads this: "Where there is no guidance, a nation falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." I'm not going to comment on that. I'm sure it's true, it's in the Bible, so it has to be true, doesn't it? We do live in very turbulent political times, and we are encouraged in the Bible to pray. Paul writes to Timothy, "First, then I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way." So may I pray. Almighty God, in these times of political turbulence, we pray for this chamber and for all involved in politics in the service of our town and our country. Bless this local council, we pray, with good relationships, strong accountability, sound decisions, effective budgeting, and servant hearts for the good of our communities and the sake of those on its margins. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. It is quite warm. If the gentlemen would like to remove their jackets, that's fine. And can I apologise? I should have said that if anybody who didn't wish to stay in for the prayers could leave, but I think everybody's aware of that. Okay, so please be seated. Right, thank you. Do the housekeeping bit now. The fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. Fire exits are both ends. So then you go down the stairs and the meeting place is in the War Memorial Park. All meetings are webcast, so members please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And on your mobile phones, could you please either turn them off or turn them to silent, please? Thank you. Also, if we do electronic voting, if you require a recorded named vote, you must request a recorded vote for it to be recorded in the minutes. And please, can you ensure that all your cards are fully pushed in? Okay, we'll go to item 1, which is apologies for absence. I have one for Councillor Stephen Day. Are there any? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Joyce Bowyer, Councillor Sven Goddison, Councillor Venetia Rowlands and Councillor Rob Musson.
Was it, I think, Gavin James?
Apologies for Councillor Stuart Parker.
Right. Right. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor.
I've got a pecuniary interest in item 13, the community infrastructure plan levy. As a member of the BasingstokeGov Club, it could affect that.
Thank you. Were there any more? No? Right, thank you. Then we'll continue with the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 26th of May. Obviously, you've got them all in your paperwork. Are they all agreed? Good. Right. Item 4 is announcements. So I'll start with my mayor's announcements. I sent a letter to the family of Joe Cox following the Member of Parliament's tragic death, and thank you to those that got back to me and were happy for me to do so. I attended Erskine. I still can't get it right, and even when I was talking to the people over there, even they did. Erskirkin, isn't it? Anyway, unfortunately we lost the trophy. However, our teams all made a supreme effort and did us proud, and the Mayor's Challenge, we did win the Mayor's Challenge. But they really did do us proud, and it was a wonderful. I didn't understand about twinning till you've been and you actually then see the benefit of doing twinning. The dates for my Mayor's Charity and civic events will be sent in the members' bulletin, and I do believe that a letter's gone out now about the 1st of October for the variety, and that promises to be really good. We've got a lot of people on from all different ages. Also, I've actually got an apology to make, because unfortunately for a short time the Mayor's Charity Appeal online donation, it wasn't working, so it now has been, it's been corrected, so online donations are now possible. So you can check either with Basingstoke and Dean or the BVA, but obviously making it obvious that it's for the Mayor's Charity. I'll hand over now for the leader, who will give an update on devolution, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
What's your point of order, Councillor Keating?
My point of order is that we agreed previously that announcements of this nature which do not allow questions are inappropriate for updates. Thank you.
Sorry, could you? Sorry. Just a minute, because I will ask our Chief Executive. My recollection is the same as yours. My recollection is that we said it's ideally we wouldn't, but we felt that this was a very important subject and that you should be kept up to date. And if there is nothing to report, then you'll be told that there's nothing to be reported. But it's a very, very important. It's the whole future for our borough. So I actually asked for us to have updates. So I will be allowing the update by the leader. Yes, Councillor Keating.
Could I ask that my specific objection be recorded, please?
Yes, certainly. Right, leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And of course, I don't think I need to say that if Councillor Keating or any other councillor at any time has any question they want to ask about devolution, I'd always be very happy to answer it outside of this particular situation here in Council. It happens that today I've been up in the DCLG for a meeting on our submission to the government for funding through the LEP. Which is not the subject for debate tonight, but what was interesting is that we're starting to get now some of the feedback coming through from officers, officials, contacts with the new team in the DCLG, led by the new Secretary of State, about what their priorities are going to be for the future. And what is relevant to this statement is that it was made very clear that amongst the top 3 of their priorities, devolution remains intact. So devolution will be an ongoing theme, I think, which we shall be coming back to talk about at some considerable length, no doubt, over the next few months, if not years. But it hasn't gone away just because there's been a change in government. Following our council meeting on the 26th of May last time, as indicated at that meeting, we have indeed commissioned from PwC a report covering all aspects of potential devolution solutions, from combined authorities to unitaries to other forms of restructuring. And as part of the process of carrying out that review, PwC have actually been engaged. They had a series of meetings with group leaders, and following which they've then had a series of meetings with leaders of other councils. And we now have 14 out of the 15 local authorities in Hampshire signed up to this process. The one exception being Hampshire County Council, who have been invited. We have asked them to participate in this. So far, they have declined to enter into any information sharing protocol, which would have been very helpful to the process. But they have agreed that they will have a stakeholder meeting, if you like, with PwC, so that at least is some progress there. I'm hopeful that they may change their mind about the information protocol, because after all, it's information about public services for public, for the general public, and therefore why should anything not want to be shared? I think it's difficult to know why that would be the case, but we will work on that. Following our meeting, also, as you may be aware, those of you who have parishes, there has been an HCC, what one might call charm offensive, where we have the strange sight of the chief executive of the county council going out to talk to parish councils to persuade them what a wonderful concept this is, that they are wanting to put forward, particularly the one of having a Hampshire-wide unitary, which was the one that was the preferred choice out of the report which they had commissioned themselves. As the next stage in that process, they have now announced their own consultation on their own report, which will be starting next week. But they've selected out of that, apart from looking at some combined authority options, they've selected out of that just 2 unitary options, one for the whole of the county, but actually excluding Southampton, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight, so it isn't the whole of the county, and then one which actually divides the county into 2. And as far as one can tell, the only reason on which this choice has been made has been purely on cost grounds, that those would be the ones which would affect the greatest saving. They're using the Deloitte report that they commissioned as their evidence. There's been no consultation on the consultation with districts. In fact, we only received this week what it was that they were going to put out for consultation, the questionnaire, etc., but with a big note across the top saying, we're very welcome to comment on this, but this will be our decision and we'll decide what goes out anyway. So somewhat less than encouraging to participate in the process. In the meanwhile, Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight have today, this afternoon, launched their own consultation on their own bid, which they're entitled to put forward because they're autonomous councils, for a Solent combined authority as part of their governance review, which is one of the stages that you have to go through to getting there. So that's triggered that, regardless of what comes out of what Hampshire are doing at the moment. But we have made it very clear to Hampshire, along with many other of our councillors, that we do not believe this is the right time to be consulting. They are well aware of the research that we are doing, to look at things from the bottom up, to look at how it is possible to balance local cost savings with local choice and local voice. And until we have both sides of the picture, so we have the Deloitte report on one side, we have the PwC report on the other, which should be complementary, provided we can get access to the data of the Deloitte report, only then are we going to be able to really step back and look at all the possibilities and to narrow it down to what is the most relevant for the residents of the county as a whole, but most particularly for us, for the residents of Basingstoke. So we have to make it clear that we don't support the HCC consultation at all, that we do believe it's better to wait, and that full consideration needs to be given to a much wider range of options, and therefore we should be writing to all of our parishes and to all of our partners within the borough to make that position extremely clear as we possibly can to them. I should, however, emphasise that we nevertheless remain committed to, if necessary, making changes in local government, and we are very committed to working constructively to achieve that with whoever we can find to work constructively with. But there has to be two to tangle. Any change that comes forward must protect the interests of the people of Basingstoke. And it must put our residents at the heart of whatever is decided. And I think our position does not change in that way at all. Anything less than that will not be acceptable, I'm sure, to us as a council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Keating.
With your permission, could I ask one question, please?
I'm afraid it wasn't with questions. I think the leader has said if you want to go and ask him questions afterwards,
Okay.
he's happy to
I'll see you outside in a
speak to
moment. Bloody stupid.
Please refrain from language like that, Councillor Keating. That's not called for. Item 5, sorry, an important one. We're now going to make the presentations to the two of our past councillors that have arrived, and those that haven't, the certificates will be sent to them. And thank you. Right. The first one will be John Lee.
Thank you. I see Keating doesn't get any better anyway. When I was sitting across there and we had similar presentations, I used to think, please be quick. We've got a very big agenda and I want to get home to drink my wine. So I'll be very quick tonight. I'll just say I enjoyed my period of office enormously, but I'm enjoying retirement even more. So thank you for this certificate. I'm very pleased that we all voted for Brexit. Well, at least I hope you voted for Brexit.
That's naughty.
And
You were always wrong.
I've always been on the right side. And thank you, this particular group, for keeping Mr. Corbyn in office, because that's certainly helping the Conservatives. And finally, please look after the anvil. It's, I think the anvil is the real asset of this town, and please protect it. So thank you very much. I enjoyed it enormously. And those who are nearly as old as me, I should really think about retirement. It's wonderful.
All right, and the other person at present is Mr. Eric Dunlop. Seems funny saying Mr, doesn't it, after all this time? Right. Can I just say that both councillors did 16 years service each, which is quite some considerable time. So, congratulations, Jonathan.
Right.
Right.
Look at it. That's great.
Okay.
Thank
Would
you
you like to
very
say a few words?
If I may. Shall I use this one?
Yeah.
Light on it? Jolly good. Well, Madam Mayor, borough officers, fellow councillors, thank you for the honour which you have bestowed upon me this evening. I have enjoyed my 16 years with the council, working with you. When I look around this borough and I see the improvements which have been made over those 16 years, I've been very proud to be a member of the group which has made it possible. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you both very much, and thank you for all your service. Okay, bye. Right, now go to item 6, which is questions from members of the public of which is the normal is 20 minutes. So could I ask Dr. Deborah Rolfe to come forward? Thank you.
Good evening, thank you. My questions concern adoption of the Overton Neighbourhood Plan. Do you agree that if the unelected Overton Neighbourhood Plan Committee has not followed correct procedures, that their plan is open to challenge in the courts and should not be adopted? Do you trust your colleagues, the elected borough councillors for Overton, who have both publicly stated that the Overton Neighbourhood Plan Committee have not followed correct procedures? And if so, do you not have a duty to throw out, or at the very least postpone, adoption of the Overton Neighbourhood Plan until these concerns have been fully investigated?
Right. Thank you for your question. Councillor Mark Raffel, will you answer, please?
Madam Mayor, can I thank Dr. Rolfe for her questions? As we all know, that planning is a potentially difficult subject and it doesn't always get universal agreement. And we also know that referendums tend to divide opinion, and if you are on the losing side, perhaps you're less happy than if you're on the winning side, as we've all experienced a referendum recently. Can I just say that qualifying bodies who can determine and create a neighbourhood plan are town and parish councils and local groups, not the borough council. And in this instance, and I say this, Madam Mayor, for the benefit of others listening, as with many neighbourhood plans, Overton Parish Council delegated the work of actually preparing the plan to a group of local residents. The parish council voted for the neighbourhood plan to advance at each of the key stages required by the Neighbourhood Planning General Regulations of 2012. The borough council's role was to provide assistance, to encourage and support, and to check that the right procedures were in place and the legalities were being complied with. And the borough gave that support as it's required to do under the Town and Country Planning Act as amended. The council made every effort to ensure that the legal requirements were satisfied, and the council commissioned a health check on the neighbourhood plan from an independent examiner, and it was found to be healthy, the council took, this is the borough council, took expert legal advice where appropriate during the process. In terms of the making process, which is what we have before us today, and the options before full council, we have to remember that because more than 50%, in other words, there's a majority of 53% who voted for the referendum, supported the adoption of this neighbourhood plan, we are required to make that plan. As outlined in the report, there are only very limited circumstances whereby the council cannot make the neighbourhood plan, namely where there would be a breach or otherwise be incompatible with EU law or human rights obligations. And during the course of the plan's preparation, there was an assessment carried out as required to ensure that it was compatible with EU law and human rights legislation. And the independent examiner concluded that he was satisfied that it was so compatible. And as a consequence, it is our professional view and the professional view of the officers of this council whose advice I take, that there is no reason for the council not to make the plan. Therefore, the borough is satisfied that the correct legal procedures have been followed, and the only option, therefore, is to make the plan as we're required to do by the regulations. I've been asked about whether I trust fellow councillors. Councillors are, as they are wont to do, entitled to make representations where they want to in the course of planning decisions and, of course, in the course of referendums. The borough has made every effort to try and ensure the correct procedures have been followed. and that people have given the correct information. I should say to Dr. Rolfe, I've received no direct representation from either of the councillors for Overton, nor have either turned up to the Cabinet when this matter was discussed and raised any concerns. So what it is that they want to say, I will listen carefully to later tonight if they say something on this topic. But as far as I'm concerned, the correct procedures have been complied with. So that's all I want to say at the moment to the questions that have been asked.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary on the content of the answer?
Thank you for your comments. My supplementary question is, were you aware that one of the volunteers on the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Committee is a landowner whose land was not only included in the neighbourhood plan, but when residents were asked to vote for their preferred option of which areas of land should be used, his land was included in all the options. He will probably make about £1 million from his land. The Neighbourhood Planning Committee have never declared this. Do you not think some would deem that corrupt?
Councillor Fell, do you want to answer that?
Well, Madam Mayor, the difficulty is... the difficulty is...
Sorry, is somebody's mic left on?
Madam Mayor, that if matters aren't raised in a timely matter, it's difficult to judge whether this would affect a referendum. The referendum is on the neighbourhood plan. That's a document that's examined on its merits. It's not on the rights or wrongs or who owns a piece of land. That isn't part of what's the referendum about. The referendum is to decide where housing should go within the Overton parish. And that is what it has decided. And as far as we are concerned, then the referendum was carried out in a perfectly proper manner. The residents of Overton were satisfied, a majority of them, that the plan had their best intentions at heart as to where they would wish the development to be. And I can see no reason whatever for the plan to be not made tonight.
Thank you. I understand you've got 4 questions, so if you'd like to do the second question, and can I just say, when the councillor stands up to answer, I would sit down and get a rest.
Thank you. A planning application has been submitted to build 165 new homes in Overton on a site excluded from this neighbourhood plan. It's called the Great North Field. Are you aware that the Overton Neighbourhood Plan site selection process excluded this land and refused to talk to the developer on the basis of comments apparently written by residents on post-it notes and questionnaires posted into an unmonitored box? Did you know that whilst approximately 240 people have submitted objections to the development of the Great North Field, a far higher number, 1,149 residents, voted no to the Overton Neighbourhood Plan? Do you agree that the developer would have a good chance of a successful legal challenge to this neighbourhood plan? If they were successful, who would pay their legal costs?
Thank you. Councillor Fell, would you like to answer?
Madam Mayor, I don't agree with many of the premises put forward by Dr. Rolfe, and I certainly don't agree with the analysis. The plan is supported by a detailed document. As we've seen, we have it, setting out the housing site selection process. This explains the means by which the Great North Field site was assessed during the course of the public consultation. And the process that was gone through, it's all explained, and the site assessment analysis conducted by the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group. that site was also assessed as part of the sustainability appraisal, which underpinned the neighbourhood plan. The site was not allocated on the basis of being incompatible with the preferred emphasis on smaller sites, along with the impact of certain constraints. Now, what has to be understood here, Madam Mayor, is that not only is the questioner wrong because the site was looked at, but it's the prerogative of the local community who is promoting the neighbourhood plan to choose the criteria that it wishes to adopt in order to select where it wants the housing to go. That's the whole essence of a neighbourhood plan. And as a consequence of those choices, it determined it didn't want that site. But there's more than that. The independent examiner was supportive of the site assessment material produced by the neighbourhood planning group. He also noted the representations made by the landowner for the Great Northfield site, but made no recommendation that this site should be incorporated into the neighbourhood plan. Therefore, it's not considered that the Great Northfield site has been excluded from the process as suggested. Quite the opposite. It was in the mix, but it didn't make the cut. And now, as far as, and I should say, that's just how a referendum works. That's how a neighbourhood plan works, and that's how a referendum works. As far as the fact that a number of people have submitted objections to the Great Northfield site, well, the majority of residents who voted in the referendum, that's 53%, supported the neighbourhood plan. And so the consequences of that is that we must make the plan. The number of objections in relation to a completely different planning application, that should have, it's like comparing chalk and cheese. Those objections have no bearing on the neighbourhood plan. And so consequently, I don't understand the point that's perhaps being made. As far as a legal challenge by the developer, the only thing I can say is most definitely not. But of course, we'll wait and see. But most definitely not. As far as I could say, it's perhaps the other way round. If we don't make the plan, it might be an open goal for a legal challenge by those who think it should be made to attack us as councillors, especially those who voted to stop it. And if the question of costs, one wonders where the costs might go. So I would say that based upon those questions, there are no reasons not to make the plan.
Sorry, before I ask you if you've got a supplementary, I've got two councillors who've put their hands up. There's no debate on at this stage. Is it a point of order? I'm just wondering whether it would be later on in the paper when they would have the opportunity.
I think it was named by the questioner.
Okay, as you've not actually been named at this stage, but when it's on the later paper, I've got you down to speak first, okay? Right, and have you then got a point of order?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Just that I'm looking through the questions as per the Constitution and the scope of the questions, and I just think that given the detail of the questions being asked and the legalese that's being used, whether the questioner is required to disclose additional information relating to the questions that she's asking, i.e. does she live next door to one of the sites, is there pecuniary impact on her personally?
Right, I'm not aware of that, but we are taking the questions at face value. But there is a later when you can put questions and make comments. So, can I ask Dr. Rolfe, have you got a supplementary that's on the content of the last answer that was given?
Thank you. If I may say, I would be very happy to answer this councillor's questions if need be later in the meeting. I'm sorry, I was just saying, if necessary, I'm more than happy to answer this councillor's questions also. I would like to say in response to your very full answer, thank you. I'm still concerned that if the Great Northfield development is refused because it's not in the neighbourhood plan and therefore it's not in the Basingstoke local plan, would you not expect the developer to appeal or take legal action concerning the neighbourhood plan, especially because the neighbourhood plan have made errors that we know about and possibly even some that we don't know about?
Okay.
All right.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Fell, would you like to answer?
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm just wondering if, from a personal point of view, if Councillor Rolfe came to the consultations. I'm just wondering why it hasn't come up before. But
Madam Mayor,
continue.
I'll answer the question. Of course, one can't anticipate what an unsuccessful developer might do, and I'm not going to do so. But what I will say is this: if we make this plan today, it gives a level of protection. How much will have to be tested in the planning process, but it will give a level of protection to the residents of Overton, because that site is not in this neighbourhood plan and it's not in the local plan. Whereas if we don't make the plan, then it may well be that the developer might argue the contrary. You haven't managed to get a neighbourhood plan, so why not my site?
Right, thank you. Now, would you like to give your next question?
Thank you. Are you concerned that land assessed by your planning officers for the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, updated in August 2015 and deemed unsuitable for development, has been included in this neighbourhood plan, despite the only access to the site being down a very narrow lane past the primary school, which would inevitably increase the risk of child road accidents?
Would you like to answer that?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Can I thank Dr. Rolfe for this question, because actually it reveals something that she's unlikely to know unless she spent many, many hours watching the former Planning and Infrastructure Committee some many years ago, going through the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessments. When we all went through them, we realised that much as though it was officer opinion, we didn't like it a lot of the time on the sites, and we tried our best by many different methods to try and change the officer's opinion, and at the end of the day we were almost entirely unsuccessful, because it is officers' professional opinion. And because it is opinion, it means that they may be right, and they may well be right in most cases, but they might be wrong on their assessment. It's based on their best efforts and criteria and their expertise. And because it is an evidence-based document and a matter of opinion, it doesn't make, that's the SHLA, as we call it, doesn't make legally binding decisions about the acceptability of developing particular pieces of land within the borough. And that dichotomy, again, was explored many years ago, because various members, some sitting close to me, were saying, well, hold on, if it's got the sort of the promise from an expert saying it is developable, doesn't that encourage a developer to develop it and target it to develop? And the officers told us at the time, well, not necessarily. We have to carry out this process, but actually it doesn't mean it is promised for development until such time as a plan comes along and the site is put into a plan. But of course, the evidence that forms that assessment is relevant for all concerned to see if a site is appropriate for development. And sites can therefore be developed regardless of whether they are identified as suitable for strategic allocation in the SHLA. And that has happened since time immemorial and before anyone ever thought about the SHLA. So the site in question that is being raised was subject to public consultation and detailed analysis during the course of the preparation of the neighbourhood plan. And it's set out in the housing site assessment material produced by the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group. The neighbourhood planning allows and enables local communities to identify sites for development which they consider most suitable. And that's the whole purpose of it. It's making a local judgment on the evidence that is available. And the independent examiner concluded that the site allocations in the plan accord with those basic conditions. The development of this site will require planning permission, and issues such as highway safety will be thoroughly assessed during that process.
Right. I'm having a look and looking at the time. There is literally about 15 seconds left of the 20 minutes. However, I have sought advice and I've gone through the Constitution, and I think this is a very important subject. I propose that we continue so that everybody gets their questions, that all 6 questions that are here, because I want us to be seen to be balanced, and I think that goes for all the councillors. They all feel the same. We want to be scrupulously fair. So if you've got a supplementary on that, would you like to put supplementary?
Thank you very much. It's very revealing to hear your views of your planning officer's professional opinion. I would just like to comment that when I was a junior doctor, I was present at the death of a 4-year-old boy who was run over outside a Hampshire school. He was not killed by a dangerous driver. It only took a moment's inattention by his mother while she strapped a younger sibling into their car seat for him to stray just a few paces. He was too short for the other parent reversing their car to see him through their back window. And so 2 families' lives were devastated. Do you not agree that if this neighbourhood plan is adopted, it would be extremely unlikely for planning permission to be refused for the 2 sites next to Overton Primary School? More cars around the school will increase the risk of children getting run over. I beg you, will you not use this opportunity to say no?
Right, thank you. Make sure that entries are actually on the subject.
Well, Madam Mayor, every planning application has to be judged on its merits, and the highways issues will be thrashed out, and the representations made, the dangers and concerns raised by local councillors, local residents will obviously be heard, and the planning committee will give weight to them as it seems to them to be appropriate. I cannot rule a site in or out, and that is not what the purpose of this process is. The majority of the people in Overton have determined that these sites are appropriate to be in the neighbourhood plan. That's their will, and that's the whole mechanism for neighbourhood plans and the way that they're constructed. If, of course, those sites fail the planning tests repeatedly, which would seem, one would think, would be strange, and there weren't methods of dealing with these issues. Otherwise, those constraints wouldn't have necessarily allowed them to get that far. But if these sites obviously fail the planning process, then the neighbourhood plan won't have succeeded in what it sought to achieve. And obviously other sites will have to come forward in due course to satisfy the local plan, which overarches the whole of the development within Overton.
Right, thank you. I'm starting to lose my way here. You've got the supplementary?
Question 4.
Question 4, sorry.
Thank you.
Question 4 now then, please.
Overton has a history of making strong and numerous objections to any new housing development in the village. Are you surprised that people in Overton have, albeit narrowly, just voted for 29 new acres of new housing in the village? Those promoting the plan said it was for only 150 houses, and it would prevent planning permission being granted for new homes on Overton's Great North Field. Can you guarantee that there would be only 150 houses built on these 29 acres, or that the neighbourhood plan would prevent new homes being built on the Great North Field? And if not, do you accept that the campaign for the Overton neighbourhood plan has been misleading and the result of the vote is therefore invalid?
Thank you. Would you like to answer that, Councillor?
Madam Mayor, can I again thank the questioner for this, because I can understand how this may rankle with those who were unsuccessful in the referendum. Of course, there was extensive public consultation with this neighbourhood plan prior to the vote taking place. And where possible, the views of local residents were sought. They were also sought at an earlier stage in order to develop the plan. And the plan, of course, is responding to the local plan, which seeks to allocate land for at least 150 homes over the local plan's period. Clearly, with referendums, as the issues apparently crystallise, it's undoubtedly the case, experience would say, that some people try and simplify what the result might mean down to a few words. I can only say that I found that experience not particularly helpful in the recent referendum that I participated in. But a number of statements were made, as I understand it, on both sides as part of the Overton referendum campaign. The Borough Council, issued a number of statements clarifying the content and material published by the campaigns, both opposing and supporting the neighbourhood plan, including the fact the plan provides for approximately, and that obviously the words of the local plan are at least 150 new homes. It's not possible to guarantee that only 150 homes will be built on the sites allocated within the plan. No one could guarantee that, nor does the plan state that this would be the case, because the neighbourhood plan refers to approximately 150 units. And of course the referendum is based on what the neighbourhood plan says. It's not based on what the man in the pub says, and it's not based on what somebody else in your family has told you. It's based on the neighbourhood plan. And if the residents, and it's to be assumed that those 53% in Overton read and understood that neighbourhood plan, voted for it, therefore that is what they are endorsing. And conversely, it's wrong to make an assumption that 47% had a better idea. Those 47%, we simply don't know whether they had a better idea for an alternative neighbourhood plan or simply voted nothing. We don't want any development, zero. So all we can say is the 53%, and I think we should respect their decision as a borough council, took the decision, a sensible and wise decision, to manage the development over the lifetime of our local plan within Overton. And they decided to make a decision as to where that development could go, and they put that decision to the vote, and it was agreed. And that's where we are with the result of the referendum. And so I don't think there's any reason that's been suggested for that result to be challenged, and therefore I still say the plan should be made today.
Do you have a supplementary on the 150 houses question?
Thank you. May I just make the comment? I think everyone in this room knows that if you have 29 acres available for development and the local plan that asks the village to provide at least 150 units, it is surely misleading to say that there will be only or even approximately 150 units on this 29 acres.
Right, would you like to...
Well, Madam Mayor, I'll take that as a question, and what I would respectfully suggest is that it's not misleading when the local plan sets out the requirement of at least 150 houses and the neighbourhood plan sought to address it. And that's exactly what I suggest to Council that it has done.
Right, thank you. Now, is it Brian Elkins? Would you like to come forward and put your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My first question is, are council members aware that any neighbourhood plan has to be supported by a body of evidence, and that the Overton Neighbourhood Plan evidence file contains a full site assessment of the Great North Field and the minutes of 2 meetings held with the landowners' representatives and Dandara, the developer? And I can personally vouchsafe for that, since I was present at the second of those meetings as project manager for the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you. Right, thank you. Would you like to answer that,
Well,
Councillor?
Madam Mayor, can I thank Mr Elkins for his question. I only know who he is from what it says in the question. I have no knowledge of him, and as far as I'm aware, never met him before. But quite clearly, he feels strongly enough, I would say, Madam Mayor, to come forward and explain. And I agree with what he has said, that any neighbourhood plan has to be supported by a body of evidence. That evidence has to be examined, it has to be tested, and it has to be put out there for the residents to consider. And that was done in this case. And of course, within that, as I've already said to the previous questioner, there was a full site assessment conducted at the Great North Field, and there were a number of meetings conducted with the landowner's representative, and the result of that was, as I said before, it was in the mix, but it didn't make the cut. And that's exactly what a neighbourhood plan can do, and was perfectly proper in doing, as far as I can tell.
Thank you, Mr. Alkin. Have you a supplementary on that subject? No. Would you like to put your next question in, please?
Would members agree that since the only grounds on which the Council may legally vote against the motion are incompatibility with EU obligations and/or human rights legislation, that individual opinions held by Dr. Rolfe or anyone else, including myself, about the preparation or content of the Overton Neighbourhood Plan cannot be taken into account following the favourable majority vote at the referendum?
Thank you. Would you like to answer that?
Well, Madam Mayor, yeah, again, can I thank him for his question? I think he must be right, that the referendum was conducted fairly, openly, transparently, in accordance with all the usual electoral rules, and that 53% of the residents in Overton took the view that they wanted the neighbourhood plan adopted, and that the only mechanisms for us delaying that or stopping it are whether it's incompatible with EU obligations, which is not, or it's incompatible with human rights legislation, which has been deemed not to be as well. And therefore, the only option for this council in due course is to make the plan.
Right. Do you have a supplementary question? Right. Just one moment.
Madam Mayor.
Sorry. Yeah, is there a point of order?
Well, there's two points here, really. Thanks to the portfolio holder, fine orator that he is.
Can I just say, Councillor Finnemore, when we come up to item 10, you will be able to...
No, I'm coming in now with a constitutional issue,
you have
please,
a point of...
which is paragraph 11.9 of our constitution. But I did want to, as I was named, I wanted to make a personal clarification to the portfolio holder that he was correct in saying that we hadn't turned up at cabinet meetings, but both myself and Councillor Tilbury made plenty of representations to borough officers with a variety of mixed and muddled messages. Now I move on to the proposal, if I may. Can I please move at these questions?
Hang on a moment, please. No. I think you're confusing with an item 10, which you will then put...
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Paragraph 11.9 of the Constitution says, can I please move that these questions are referred to a relevant committee for them to consider?
Okay, if you hang on, I will just check that through on the Constitution. Okay. I've been advised that yes, you can do, but then it would go straight to a vote and there would be no debate. So you're prepared to lose debate? Okay, then, if you want to put forward your proposal, and then it would be seconded, and then we will debate it, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, can you read it out, please?
Can I please move that these questions from the residents are referred to the relevant committee for them to consider?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you... Right, is that seconded?
I'll second that, Madam
Councillor Tilbury's seconded.
So the motion is now put to a vote.
So now the motion is now put to the vote. Sorry.
Can I just clarify, Madam Mayor? If the question is moved to a committee, obviously that's just the question. We still have the substantive coming up on the agenda and possibly an amendment. Presumably we would still discuss that, and therefore we may have made a decision before the questions even got to a committee.
Right, I'm going to ask who's had advice from the legal to answer that, because I'm as unsure as you are.
Members, a potential motion has been circulated on behalf of Councillor Phillimore, so therefore members should have access to that. Clearly, there would be an opportunity to discuss that as part of the debate under agenda item 10. In the event, however, Councillor Phillimore has asked under the Constitution that the point be raised now. Under the Constitution, it can be raised as long as it's seconded, but in that case, there is a vote without debate. Councillor Phillimore has indicated that his preference is to take the item now, and it has been seconded, and therefore it can be taken by a vote without debate. There's been a request for a named recorded vote. We will still come back to the item, as Councillor Gavin James has indicated, because clearly the substantive matter is still on agenda item 10 on the agenda, where I would anticipate that members would have the report in front of them and be able to debate the matter.
Yes, Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm simply slightly confused, which is unusual. Is the Chief Executive saying that if we vote on this issue now to send it to a committee, that we will not be able to discuss item 10? A shake of the head is enough. Thank you.
Councillor Keating, no, I'm not saying that. I think what I'm saying is that in terms of a orderly conduct of business, the issue would fall to be debated and discussed under agenda item 10. However, Councillor Phillimore, as is his right, has asked for the matter to be taken now in terms of the point that he wishes to put to the Council. That has been seconded, and therefore we are able to take that issue now. If Councillor Phillimore wishes to reconsider and to take the item together at agenda item 10, then that would be possible to do.
Who's got their light?
Councillor Phillimore, would you like to answer
Yeah.
that? I'm trying to give the opportunity for item 10 to get full debate.
I'm happy to take them together. As the Chief Executive suggested, I'll take them both at 10.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
I just
Madam
think
Mayor.
we want to have proper debate. This is very important.
Sorry.
Very important.
Just a point of order, Madam Mayor. If I
Right,
could
can-
draw,
just
just a very
one
quick
moment.
one, just to draw your attention to point 815 in the Constitution on personal explanations, which, to save you looking for it, I'll read out. The fact that a member has been named in debate will not in itself be accepted as a reason for allowing a personal explanation. Of course, the ruling of the Mayor on the admissibility of a personal explanation will be final, but it is normally not the case that we would allow points which do not relate back to an earlier speech which we have made in committee. That's why I've just said that, actually. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for your observations. I intend for us to carry on with matters of business. Just one moment. Thank you. I intend to carry on because I think this is an important subject and I think it will get much better debate under item 10. Right. Item 7 is petitions. I've not been made aware of any petitions. Are there any petitions? Right, then we will go to item 8, which is resignations and appointments. A, is there any from committees or to make any necessary reappointments? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Audit Committee, Councillor Dan Putty to come off the committee and Councillor Donald Sherlock to come on.
Right, thank you. Was there any more? Right then. Sorry. All right. Right then, under B, to receive resignations from outside bodies and to make any reappointments and fill existing vacancies as on page 21. Yes, Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Laura James and Councillor Paul Harvey for Vine Community School.
Right, is that seconded? Is that agreed? Right, okay. Right, we now go to item 9, which is the Property and Alternative Investment Strategy. I would remind members that there are some confidential information and we would know to go into private session should anyone wish to speak on any specific detail of that information. So I would call Councillor, is it to propose? Sorry, Isa, I do apologise. I don't like people saying my name wrong, so I do apologise.
There's no sympathy from me.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. This report is a recommendation from Cabinet to full Council to firstly approve the establishment of an Investor Grow Fund investment strategy, and secondly to allow the allocation of the £25 million earmarked under the Alternative Investment Strategy to that fund. We are a successful borough experiencing strong economic growth and job creation. We want this to continue, and this administration says that this council has a role and indeed a responsibility to make full use of the funds it holds on behalf of residents to promote economic activity, including more jobs and new homes here in the borough. And by so doing, to encourage the private sector to see that we are a business-friendly borough, that opportunities abound here, and to co-invest with us through this fund. The new fund has been through a long period of preparation and investigation, which I thank our officers and advisors for. It will be launched formally this year if full council gives its approval tonight. It will start with a significant capitalisation of £25 million drawn from our long-term Treasury holdings and made available in the form of loans and direct equity investment into local asset-backed opportunities, supporting this council's economic and social priorities. Investments will be carefully assessed in terms of risk and business case through an external, independent, FCA-regulated fund manager with the objective of achieving market returns. By recycling the capital as projects mature, we aim to multiply the benefits of the initial capital outlay and generate returns that can also be used for important services we provide to residents as a council. Good projects that might not get off the ground because of the lending constraints of the banks and their focus on London and the main regional cities, will have another source of funding in this borough. Similar initiatives have worked well in places such as Manchester and Sheffield. I'm pleased that this potentially significant innovation for our borough has the endorsement of all members of the Audit and Accounts Committee, who will have an ongoing monitoring role on the fund's performance. In conclusion, this proposal demonstrates this Council's proactive approach to sustainable growth, our willingness to seek new and better ways to use the public funds we hold, and our partnership approach, our enthusiastic partnership approach to the private sector. On behalf of the Cabinet, I recommend it to full Council.
Thank you. Do you you're seconding, yes?
Sorry, I thought the leader was seconding.
Sorry, you're doing Councillor Bound. Were you second? You were seconding. Right, I saw about 3 hands go up. So I was,
does he want to speak now, or does he want
all right, so, okay, then,
does he want to speak now, or does he want to speak later?
yeah, do you want to speak now or do you want to reserve till later?
I'll reserve it to later if it's necessary, madam.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll go. First on the list then is Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think using council funds to invest in strategic projects, as described here, is welcome. As the Cabinet member has already alluded to, a number of other authorities around the country make use of their capital in this way to achieve the social good that they desire out of it as much as a return for their local authorities. So it is wholly appropriate that this council not only consider this as an appropriate way forward, but that we look very carefully at where we would choose to make those investments for the social return we would want to succeed in achieving. And out of that, then the taxpayer and this authority benefit in the context of returns to the authority's budget that could then be reinvested in services and the future of this council. So understanding that, we welcome the principles that are held within here and make really one major point. We want to see this fund used to deliver new homes in particular in this borough. It is a priority for us. I know it's a priority for others that they should share across the chamber, I would assume. But what we're talking about is affordable housing. And what we're talking about is partnerships, both regeneration and affordable housing in the way we understand it, not necessarily the way the government do, in the context of what would meet our residents' needs, both socially and economically. So we're looking to see schemes brought forward under this proposal, under this budget, schemes that are supported by the Cabinet, supported no doubt by this chamber, I hope, to deliver more homes in this borough for people who need them. And in particular, we mean affordable housing, as I say. So we want to see the fund succeed, we want to see it make a return, we also want to see the social good. I would just make one point about the documentation in front of us, without referring to any specifics of the pink papers, but looking throughout all of the documentation. I note the amount of words given over to the Council's property investments and commercial, as opposed to housing, and I would welcome seeing far more column inches given over to housing than just commercial in this. I see the reasons and the understanding of where the document is coming from, but if we're actually going to fulfil all of those ambitions, and as I say, the one we're pushing for, I hope the Cabinet will look to bring partners on board to deliver that kind of initiative in housing.
Right. Thank you. I have Councillor Gardner and then followed by Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before moving to this motion, I'd just like to congratulate you on winning the Mayor's Challenge at the Festival of Sport. I must admit, 2 years ago when I was in Erskirchen, the best I could do was an honourable draw. However, losing in Germany is no disgrace. It's a compliment to our hosts. However, the Deputy Mayor has a big challenge next year when he has to win it back. Speaking to the motion, as Chair of Audit and Accounts, the committee reviewed this paper prior to the Cabinet on June the 27th. The committee was supportive of the proposal, welcomed the initiative, and it received the support of all the political groups. However, we did stress the importance of adequate training to be provided to the committee to enable it to carry out the monitoring role and the need for frequent, as opposed to regular, reports on the progress of the fund. The fund is targeted at a minimum return 1% above the current average return from Treasury management. In fact, the benefit will be greater than 1%, because although there was reference to the long-term Treasury funds, it's actually the short-term holdings we currently have where the current return is negligible, where a 3.5% return will make a big difference to the borough and to the residents from the income that arises. So I will certainly support this initiative.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to take note of this. I'm rising in support of this paper. Along with Councillor Gardner, I sit on the Audit and Accounts Committee, and I have done for a number of years. And in welcoming this, I would put a measure of restraint on that welcome, because this is a small proportion of all our financial investments in money terms. It's a small proportion. It does, however, have the value of saying we'll invest in Basingstoke. Many of our other investments, and there are damn sight more than 25 million, we lend to other local authorities, in some cases, for them to build houses. So our money is lent to other local authorities for them to build houses. Now, that's crazy, when we should and could be building here. And it's Basingstoke Borough ratepayers who make these funds available to us. They're not our funds, they belong to the ratepayers. And we should not be reticent in using borough funds in the borough. Now, I looked very carefully through the paperwork that we've got in this report, and I have endorsed it as a member of the Audit Committee prior to tonight. And I do not reconcile from that in any shape or form. But the one area of substance is housing. It's in 1.1, the first paragraph of the executive summary, and you would look far and long within the whole of the report to find housing mentioned again. It would be a shame and a dereliction of duty if we didn't make homes a key factor of these forms of investment. I welcome it because it's a big step on a long journey that we should be taking, but we could be taking bigger steps. Thank you, Mayor.
Right. Councillor Saunders, would you like to second speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, I think we are all remarkably in agreement this evening. This is a small beginning, and if you call £25 million a small beginning, but I don't think we should underestimate the impact that we may see as a result of Brexit if we find that interest rates are reduced by 0.25%. That will, in the long term, as our investments unwind, and particularly our gilts investments unwind, and we look to try and reprovide those at the equivalent prices that we got at the time, it will not be possible. So it is vital that we start to look at alternative places to invest our money in the future if we are going to sustain the amount of income that we have traditionally had from our investments. This is not a political point, it's an economic point, that we will hit a very large problem in trying to find financial alternative, financial instruments which will give us the same rate of return as we currently enjoy. And therefore, I would hope that this scheme will be a forerunner of us being able to put more money into it and see more benefit being generated within the borough for the borough, but at the same time to enable us to secure a degree of protection against the winds of change within the markets and within the interest rates, which we unfortunately are just subject to and can do nothing about. So I would support the motion and move it, I think.
Would you like to come back and sum up now then, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm very grateful to have cross-party support for this proposal. As I said in my remarks, the policy is designed to promote new jobs, which is important for the borough, and also I made specific reference to providing finance for new housing, to enable new housing in the borough. I can assure Councillor Harvey that housing is at the centre of this fund. One thing he has to bear in mind is that we're going to need proposals to come forward to invest in, and so let's see what emerges. But we'll be looking for them, I can assure him. The leader has responded to Councillor Keating. It is, I think, a pretty substantial start to fund something to the tune of £25 million. And if this is as successful as we hope it's going to be, then there will be more money found for it. Clearly, as the leader has said, we need to be securing the sorts of returns that this fund is seeking to achieve in the face of investment returns in the market for our gilts, which are low and likely to get lower. So,
sorry, can you continue?
Thank you very much. So, I appreciate the support from councillors around the chamber, and therefore I'm happy to recommend this proposal to full council.
Right, thank you. I just hope that we're going to maintain good order throughout. Sorry, another subject coming up, and I'm hoping that we have good order. I'm now going to put this to the vote. And all those in favour, will you please raise your hands? I think we can declare that unanimous unless anybody tells me any differently. Okay. Right, then we go on to item 10, where Councillor Raphael, would you like to...
Madam Mayor, I beg to move the recommendation under item 10 that full council under section 38A4 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 make, that's the technical word, the Overton Neighbourhood Plan with immediate effect, with the consequence that it becomes part of the statutory development plan for Basingstoke and Dean Borough. Of course, I'm anticipating an amendment to that recommendation to be tabled by Councillor Phillimore shortly. And so, in support of that recommendation, may I just say a few words and then I will remain silent. The people of Overton have spoken. 53% is a majority. We have to respect the result. And it's my view, and it is the view that's based upon a consideration of the legislation, that we have an obligation to make their neighbourhood plan. Planning can be controversial. We all know that. But just because it is controversial doesn't mean that when a vote is taken, we should then ignore the result. We should respect the result, even if it is close, because that is democracy. And a neighbourhood plan is a good thing. It's a good thing where sensible, local people have pooled their collective talents and come up with what they believe is the best solution to manage the growth of the area that they live in. They believe they can do that better than leaving it to us as a council, as at our level, and certainly better than leaving it to some southeast body, as we used to have some time ago. So I support what the local people have done. I applaud their efforts in coming together and pooling their talents, and I hope that at the end of the debate tonight we will make this plan. Madam Mayor, if there is an amendment tabled, I'd like to be called to speak with your blessing later, after I've heard from Councillor Phillimore and Councillor Tilbury, should they choose to speak, so I can respond.
Right, I'll put you on the list. For the time being, have you got a seconder, please? Sorry, was that Councillor Mrs. Bean? Would you like to speak now, or are you going to reserve your to speak?
She's reserving.
You're
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will move the amendment as identified, that the full council requests the relevant committee to review the concerns expressed by both members of the public this evening, others in the Overton community, and that the committee reports its findings to the Cabinet, and that Cabinet is asked to consider the report from the relevant committee thereafter. As a councillor for Overton, it is important that I ensure my whole community is represented, that the voices of the people in my ward and community are listened to in this chamber. So I stand here tonight to speak on the Overton Neighbourhood Plan with a very heavy heart. This plan is flawed. At every stage of its production, from the formation of the planning group, to the site selections, to the communication to residents, to the choice of the examiner, finally to the referendum, there have been serious mistakes made that many local people feel very strongly about. I'm afraid this poorly produced plan has split our community, and a narrow first past the post result has resulted in 52.9% of the people vote one way, 47.1% vote the other. I wholly respect the democracy of the result, and I have a duty as much to recognise the will of the referendum, but to also recognise the narrow margin. We need to be very careful here. Simply ignoring the 47.1%, just like in the Brexit vote, risks ignoring a large part of my community. Similarly, not acknowledging the 52.9% risks not seeing democracy fulfilled. I do not want to see my community divided, neighbour pitted against neighbour as they have been. The Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group was a coalition of the unelected and the unelectable, and even included a landowner with a vested interest in building on his own land, who later in the referendum urged residents to vote for the plan on the social media. The planning group met with developers in secret and then presented an exhibition of these developers' plans in January 2015. At this exhibition, residents were asked to choose from 3 scenarios chosen by the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group and deposit their votes in an unmonitored ballot box. A total of 384 votes were recorded. Whether these were residents or developers present, who knows? 148 votes were cast in favour of the scenario of the sites that ended up framing the Overton Neighbourhood Plan, which is hardly representative of the population of the village. In fact, less than 1% actually shaped the proposals coming forward. The identification of numerous possible sites only opens up Overton to more speculative development in future, as a neighbourhood plan is a minimum, not a maximum, and by approving the plan, the principal development will be conceded on each site in turn. Whilst the local plan suggests at least 150 houses, as soon as we lose our 5-year land supply, then developers will be circling like vultures. The submission version of the Overton Neighbourhood Plan was only available online at first, then only placed at 3 venues with limited opening times in the village for those with no access to a computer. Residents were incorrectly informed by the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group they could make further comments after the completion of the submission stage. Residents who did make representations in the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group were generally ignored. A petition of 290 residents, 49 residents, was arrogantly dismissed as a single objection, and those making the objections called NIMBY by a couple of parish councillors supporting the plan. However, members of the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group did communicate with myself, asking which side I was on, and informing me that a vote against the Overton Neighbourhood Plan was a vote for Dan Dow's application for the Northfield site. We now face an application for an extra 165 units outside of this neighbourhood plan from Dan Dara, again undermining the process, the promises made to the people by the planning group during the process. The appointment of the examiner had to be subject of a retrospective vote as the group took it on themselves to appoint an examiner. They were not the official qualifying body, so members of the parish council had to go with an already appointed examiner to save the credibility of the group, and this actually delayed the referendum. When it came to a referendum, two opposing residents groups emerged and they were registered at the borough for and against the plan for the group. Both groups had their own leaflets corrected by the Borough Council, specifically the Yes for Overton group, mainly members of the planning group, had to have a 2-page factual update issued correcting their misleading and incorrect information. Unfortunately, this repudiation was not made available to all the residents, especially the 400 who had already cast a postal vote. And some who have informed me since, had they seen this, they would have cast a vote against. Madam Mayor, whilst the previously passed Oakley Neighbourhood Plan could be held up as a good example of neighbourhood plan with over 2,000 responses and 94% favourable vote, I'm afraid the Overton Neighbourhood Plan is far from commendable. Madam Mayor, I'm hoping we can avoid a legal challenge to this plan. I'm asking that we simply pause, that we defer any decision tonight until the next council meeting in October. This would allow us a small window which we could refer the neighbourhood plan to the relevant committee who could look to the issues of many within the local community. I'm asking that you help me ensure that my whole community is heard in addressing the concerns that have been raised. If we are to move forward, I do not want to see Overton left divided. We can do better than that. I ask for support and motion of this referral.
Right, could you turn your mic off, please? Right, do you have a seconder? Councillor Tilbury,
I'm happy to
do you
second
wish
that,
to speak
Madam.
now or
Yes, if I
reserve till
could,
later?
please, yes.
You speak now. Okay.
I'll find me glasses, yeah. Yeah, with only 52% of residents voting to support this neighbourhood plan, which I understand is the worst approval rating of any plan on record, as most are approved by at least 80% of residents who vote, it's clear that something is seriously wrong when a plan that should have united the village is instead dividing it. This has not been helped by the confused relationship between Overton Parish Council, who are the qualifying body, and the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group, who acted as if they were in control, and they were not given delegated powers to do anything. I'm afraid, Councillor Raphael, you're incorrect there. It's a complete mess. From the outset, sites were being considered that were either unavailable, such as those owned by Basingstoke and Dean or Overton Parish Council, or so unsuitable they had been rejected for inclusion in the SHLA. Even our officers thought they were totally inappropriate. Despite repeated claims that those who wrote the plan were following this council's very clear neighbourhood planning protocol document, it's no clear they did not. Neither did they follow the sensible advice of groups such as Planning Aid regarding probity in their numerous meetings with landowners and developers. We've already heard from one of the group that minutes of these meetings are on file. Unfortunately, these are not available to the public, nor I understand to the landowners or developers. They all say strictly confidential on the top. The comments I made in respect to the pre-submission version of the plan were never even taken into account and appear to have disappeared from the public domain. Having totally rewritten the plan to deal with objections from a relatively small number of residents, it was presented to Overton Parish Council as a submission version. Despite protests from myself, Councillor Phillimore and other parish councillors, and we are both parish councillors, and other parish councillors, that the submission version of the plan was full of obvious errors with repeated references to surface water drainage systems that do not even exist, and you all know that because I've raised it here before. And having changed housing sites and policies, it now bore little resemblance to the plan they had consulted the village on. We took the view they should reconsult residents. Unfortunately, the majority of the parish council agreed to send it forward to the submission stage, largely as they were persuaded that submitting the plan was another round of consultation. It wasn't, and at this point, events took a very surreal turn. Shortly after this decision, council officers emailed myself and Councillor Phillimore, as borough councillors, to advise us that Overton Parish Council had appointed Mr McGirt to examine the submitted plan. Given we were both members of Overton Parish Council, this was news to us. Eventually, it transpired that the Overton Neighbourhood Planning Group had appointed Mr McGirt from a shortlist of 3 candidates. As I pointed out to officers, under the Localism Act, the examiner must be appointed by the qualifying body, the parish council, not the over neighbourhood planning group. Yeah, it gets worse. By the time this had been resolved, Mr McGurk had examined the plan. Undeterred officers then decided that Overton Parish Council needed to pass a motion to approve Mr McGurk's appointment retrospectively. Given that the original decision was to appoint one of 3 candidates, not the one who had been appointed by another group who had no power to appoint anyone, I declined to take part in what I consider to be a vote of dubious legality. As for the actual examination of the plan, those of us, around 300 who responded, soon found out that at the submission stage, the only thing anyone can comment on is, does the plan meet the basic conditions? So to all intents and purposes, the only person able to comment on the detail of the plan was the examiner. His response was to remove 10 of the 63 pages, removing most of the more worthwhile policies relating to phasing and infrastructure. You can't have phasing and you can't say you need the infrastructure. The responses from around 300 residents and both borough councillors were not considered, and I got that from Mr McGurk himself eventually. By the time of the referendum, it was clear this plan was becoming highly divisive, with 2 rival campaigns leaflet in the village. The Yes for Overton campaign even managing to produce a website and a Facebook page. Due to a number of factually incorrect statements by both groups, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council officers were obliged to produce statements to clarify these errors. Undeterred by the facts, members of the Yes for Overton campaign, most of whom were members of the no-defunct Overton neighbourhood planning group, continued to mislead the residents, distributing basically the same leaflet, making the same claims. This is totally unacceptable. If borough officers have told you that, you should put it right. The other group did. I mean, Mrs. Rolfe, you know, there were a few errors on theirs and they did put them and didn't repeat them, but the others just carried on. Both myself and Councillor Fillimore produced our own newsletters to clarify our positions and to try to bring some clarity, but unfortunately the time taken by officers to respond to factually incorrect statements, which in some cases was nearly 2 weeks, by campaigners meant that we were unable to make these statements available, not out by the fact that around 500 residents had a postal vote and had voted before they were aware of the facts. In short, the whole process has been a farce from start to finish. It seems likely to me that at least one landowner who was excluded early on and who has been vociferous in their response to this flawed process was always likely to request a judicial review regarding the process, particularly given successful chances of other neighbourhood plans examined by Mr McGurk where he made errors. However, after the farcical referendum, I believe this is even more likely. The other obvious point is, how can we be placed in a position, as we are tonight, where we are obliged to vote to make this plan when we don't actually have a choice? Because there is no choice. We have to make the plan, so it's not actually a choice. Surely it should be a delegated decision by whoever. Councillor Raphael, possibly, because he seems to support it, but this seems like a crazy situation to me. I mean, and the point is, it's never been an issue before because neighbourhood plans have never been particularly contentious. For some reason, this one is. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I must say, how nice it was to see you in Overton the sheep fair the other day. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Now, I've got 4 speakers, that's including Councillor Raphael. Is there anybody else that wants to speak on the amendment? Right, so, yeah, Councillor Harvey, I've got you down as next. And Councillor Cubitt, I'll put you on the list, yes. Right, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The point of neighbourhood plans was that they were created to give accountable local decision making, that they established a sense of ownership and consensus on development in local areas. They are supposed to be about bringing communities together to shape their area. When introducing the NPPF, Greg Clark spoke about the change in planning culture that he wanted to see go hand in hand with planning being bottom up. To quote the NPPF, neighbourhood plans, it's supposed to provide a framework within which local people and their accountable councils can produce their own distinctive local neighbourhood plans which reflect the needs and the priorities of their communities. They are to support this. The local planning authorities should aim to involve all sections of the community in the development of local plans and in making planning decisions, and they should facilitate neighbourhood planning. It is clear from what the ward councillors and many local residents believe, the process undertaken to produce the plan by the planning group in Overton is flawed. The planning group meeting developers without proper accountability was wrong. The process of consultation was fundamentally flawed and open to manipulation. The way that the concerns of some residents were dismissed is concerning. The process was not a good example at all, especially when you look at the principles that Greg Clark seek to establish. The problem is that the campaign saw misinformation go uncorrected for so long that postal voters, over 400 of them, never saw the council's statement correcting the Yes campaign's leaflets. The problem is that the village is divided on this issue, and this is not a good place to be in. I know how strongly my two colleagues representing Overton feel on this, and how many people in Overton feel strongly on this issue. The question tonight is, do we support the decision of the Cabinet to make this plan? And based on the flawed process and what is in front of us, we have a right to question that decision tonight. We need to listen to the concerns of residents, and we need to hear the other half of the debate on this in order to be transparent in taking this forward. If we truly value localism, if we want to see development bring communities together and not divide them, then our approach to Overton is a statement of this council's respect for the whole community. Not half of it, not 53% and not 47%, not 47% and not 53%. In agreeing to send this to committee so that the concerns can be openly considered, in asking Cabinet then to consider the concerns of residents, we reinforce the integrity of localism as Greg Clark meant it to be. I will say this only once. I think the Tory minister's intent on localism that brings communities together is a very important principle that we should embrace when faced with such a difficult situation. To be fair, in this chamber, we've never disagreed on the principle of localism, and we've never actually been in a position where a referendum, a vote in a local area, has led us to this type of division being expressed by a community. We understand and respect the closeness of the vote, as Councillor Raphael put it at Cabinet, also commenting as he did on the high turnout. And that gives us even more reason to vote for this amendment, as all of those residents who voted based on the flawed information, but they voted in good faith. I think we need to be mature, we need to be serious, and we need to be reasoned in this for the sake of one of our communities in the borough. And that's why I ask you to support the amendment, so that we can be seen to be listening to the whole community. It isn't easy. This is difficult. There are democratic issues involved. There are also issues of process, issues of justice, and issues of actual integrity of the process. We've got to weigh all of that in our minds in what we do this evening. And that's why giving those full residents the opportunity to express themselves to a committee of this council and allowing Cabinet to hear that, and then making the neighbourhood plan on the basis of that, makes sure everybody's view is heard, not simply half the village. It is different if you take the context of Oakley, because that was over 90%. We are not in that position on this one, and we do need to be serious and mature in the decision we make with the issues we face from that community.
Thank you. I'm now going to call Councillor Keith Watts, followed by Gavin James, then followed by Councillor Cubitt, and then Councillor Raphael and Councillor Phillimore. Obviously, right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been sitting here thinking, however many neighbourhood plans have we got to come yet? It's going to. Councillor Tolbers reminded me that when the legislation was first announced, I said it would be divisive. I also said, quite wrongly, that I didn't think any neighbourhood plans would ever be made, because there'd be enough people that had one thing they objected to outvote any weight. Well, it's been shown in this borough that people in Oakley and now in Overton are more mature than that. And there's obviously honest disagreements. Now, I know Overton fairly well. It's always very dangerous for anyone from Whitchurch to talk about Overton. But I should say that for me to express an opinion on any of the issues raised is utterly irrelevant, because it's none of my business. And it's not really the business of this council, because this council has a duty to make sure that the legal requirements have been met, and then to make the plan. So I can't support the amendments. I do support the substantive motion. And I would just consider, if we are going to set ourselves up as an appeal court on neighbourhood plans, we're going to have to employ quite a few extra officers and have an awful lot more meetings. That isn't our role. And so, obviously, we haven't heard today from the people on the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Committee who believe they have done the right thing. Now, if we were an appeal court, we would hear all of that. But I think this amendment is attempting to set up the relevant committee as an appeal court. Well, there isn't a relevant committee, and I shall be voting in favour of the substantive motion.
Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be voting against this amendment for a number of reasons. Obviously, I'm a great believer in localism, and other people in this chamber have said this great love of localism, and then hear from the local community and decide that we should take this to a committee. It seems rather odd version of localism to turn around to the volunteers. These aren't councillors with an allowance, these aren't officers, those are volunteers, the people of Overton who have gone out, set up their own committee to look at this and come up with a neighbourhood plan, and we're turning around to these volunteers through this amendment saying, sorry, you are not good enough, we don't agree with you, we're going to have to look at it again. We also turn round to those elected to the Parish Council of Overton and who obviously agreed these. They put it forward for the consultation to go to a referendum. Indeed, I understand no parish councils voted against it going for a referendum, and I understand a few people here actually sit on that parish council. But there we go, and we're turning around to that parish council saying, sorry, that wasn't good enough. And then, of course, we've got 1,300 people of Overton who have supported it, and we're going to turn around to them, sorry, you're not good enough. Well, I don't really fancy staying to those people. This is localism in Basingstoke and Dean. Thank you, people of Overton, you've done your best, but we think we can do better as a committee of people who don't live in Overton. That seems utterly wrong. I did take some opportunity to read some of the leaflets that went out in the Overton referendum. I read one from Councillor Phillimore, which stated that I believe in localism. And yet here tonight he's saying we can't listen to local people, we have to do something very different. That seems odd. And Councillor Tilbury, I read his leaflet as well. It does go on a bit, which doesn't surprise anyone obviously in this chamber. His leaflet says, and his main problem with the neighbourhood plan is the number of homes being proposed for Overton. He says it's too many. And yet we did all that work years ago on the local plan to make sure we had the right number of homes in the right places to support the communities who needed them. Overton came out of that number. Now he tells me that number is excessive for the needs of Overton because there's less people on the waiting list. Well, I've got some bad news for Councillor Tilbury. He's wrong. Because what's probably going to happen in Overton is all those young people currently at school over the next 13 years will do something he's failed to do so far. They're going to grow up and become responsible. And at which point they may want homes of their own. So I shall support the residents of Overton. And again, I shall finish on one point, Madam Mayor.
Can we have some order, because I can't hear when there's lots of noise in the background.
It's said that the idea was to bring communities together. And it has. Communities had the opportunity to feed into their local plan. It's never going to get a consensus. There are 60 of us in this chamber. We spent 6 years not getting a consensus on the local plan. It was never realistic to get the whole of Overton behind a local plan. It's a difficult decision, controversial decision. The people of Overton have made that decision. It'd be wrong for us to say they're not good enough. So I shall vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kubert.
Yes, hi. I'm really uncomfortable as a councillor voting either ways. Sorry? Just voting on this in view of the disagreement regarding the delegated authority of the planning group. Now, Councillor Raphael specifically said that the neighbourhood planning group had delegated authority, and Councillor Tilbury, right. Well, I mean the problem, the problem is that if Councillor Tilbury is right, it does suggest to me, with the little knowledge that I have got, that it would seem a bit odd for us to opine on this plan if there is really valid legal reason for the route of the inspector's appointment. And I don't think, if I don't understand, I'm not quite sure how anybody else can understand, given none of us are lawyers.
Right, thank you. I think we now go back to Councillor Speen. Did you want to?
Councillor Raphael.
Or Councillor Ruffell, I was going to leave to last.
No,
All
Councillor
right.
Ruffell.
Councillor Ruffell then.
Madam Mayor, may I speak to the amendment? I have yet to hear anything that causes me to change my mind that this plan should be made tonight by this council. I fully understand what Councillor Phillimore has said about a heavy heart. It must be one of the worst things. It came close to me not too long ago, but to have a part of your ward fighting with another part of your ward and no doubt getting rather heated about it and probably personal. It's not an easy thing, and if you get sucked into one or t'other, you can't referee, and you just hope that somehow or other it will calm down over time. The suggestions put forward by Councillor Phillimore, as far as concerns are, that there was a concern over the site selection. That has been done transparently. It's been done in the public arena with public consultation. It's been examined. It's been checked by the borough's officers. I can see no reason for that to be gone over again. There was concern over the choice of the examiner. Let's just clarify that. The neighbourhood group who had delegated authority from the parish council appear to have selected the examiner before the parish council, who was actually meant to have endorsed it and made the selection. The result was the borough council said to the parish council, you have a choice. We can either go back a stage, or you can endorse the examiner who's looked at it. And they endorsed the examiner. Now, that is what happened. So I can't see at the end of the day what the problem is, because the examiner, there's nothing wrong with the credibility or qualifications of the examiner, and the examiner has carried out an independent examination which found that the plan and the procedures were carried out properly. Councillor Phillimore talks about threats and pressures from not having a 5-year land supply. Well, that applies equally whether we have or haven't got a neighbourhood plan. So I don't actually see that as an objection. And he talks about a pause, a strategic pause to go to a committee and then come back here afterwards. What would that achieve? We're not going to do site selection again. We're not going to select another examiner. We're not going to bounce it all the way back to Overton to say to Overton, by the way, we think you got it wrong, have another go. I mean, this is what they do in France when they have referendum results. We're not going to do that. We're going to, and I think they do it. I think they do it in Ireland as well. But we're not going to do that. We're going to listen. They do it in the Labour Party, I've been told as well. Yeah, if you don't like it, have another go. And by the way, the rules must be wrong. Anyway, I'll be on the voting paper anyway. And Councillor Tilbury has set out the procedure. He's absolutely right. Whatever I said wasn't quite right, and he is right. It's the parish council that had the delegated authority. But they supported, by a vote, every step of the way that the planning group went. Now, from what he's saying, and I obviously don't know, it looks like he's been outvoted. Perhaps he's been outvoted every step of the way. But outvoted, that's a democracy. And if you don't like it then, what's basically happened is, whatever the dispute is going on at Overton Parish Council has been blown up and brought here. Well, it can blooming well go back to Overton as far as I'm concerned. You need to learn to love each other. I think that's what we should be saying to the Madam Mayor, to the people of Overton. You can't keep bringing these issues up here. I'm not saying that it's all to do with politics. It might not be. It might be just local people who have differences of opinion because they've lived there for some longer than others, for all we know. But at the end of the day, there has been a referendum, and we need to abide by the results. And in my submission, when one looks at the process, which has been thoroughly examined, it's been looked at by our officers, they haven't advised me of any delay. And Councillor Phillimore, and I assume Councillor Tilbury, have had lengthy conversations with our borough officers. And none of our officers have turned around and said, you know what, portfolio holder, we need to have a delay as a result of what they've said. They haven't said that to me. So as far as we're all concerned, it's make it today, please. And that's what I urge all councillors to do, to reject this amendment, and then perhaps we can deal with a substantive motion.
Thank you. Councillor Phillimore, would you like to...
Yeah, I'll sum up, Madam. Madam Mayor, I've listened to the debate tonight. Thank everybody for their contributions. I've also listened to my own residents. I was elected by the people of Overton on a mandate to do two things: oppose the development of the North Field, and also work for a single site allocation in the neighbourhood plan that everyone would support. Listening to the people in Overton, they feel that the Overton neighbourhood plan doesn't really reflect the whole village views. That is obvious by how close the vote was. Just 144 votes between yes and no. Around the country, neighbourhood plans have enjoyed considerable support when they've been put to a referendum, mostly running 80 to 90% in favour when finally put to a vote. Even in our own borough, Oakley's plans enjoyed a huge support, into 94%. Never has a vote on a neighbourhood plan been this close. Never has a community been divided like this. Those that ran the planning group have acted like a clique. They have made a right mess of this whole process. Had their misinformation been corrected earlier, residents may have had a better informed decision in front of them. At a recent development control meeting, with a new local plan in place, 120 homes were approved on a site not in the neighbourhood plan in Overton. That's 120 more on top of the 150 proposed in the neighbourhood plan. And then we have Dan Dara's 165 homes proposed on the North Field. The people of Overton were promised many things by the planning group, believing that 150 homes was the amount of development they could expect. Of course, we now know that the neighbourhood plan is a minimum number, and as such, many people feel very strongly about this. We now know one of the developers proposes a site in the neighbourhood plans sees the allocation as a first phase of their wider aspiration to build a lot more homes. Councillor Tilby and I have consistently warned that the neighbourhood plan, as written by the planning group, would be a green light for much greater development in our village. We know the result of the referendum. I respect the democracy of that vote. Flawed as the process was, 53% of the village was in favour, 47% was not. As I said, just 144 votes different. I want to ensure that the whole community can be heard properly, that their concerns can be understood, and then we try and bring Overton together. Simply to press on with this plan without that would show utter disrespect to half of the village. To listen to their concerns is the democratic thing to do. In moving my amendment tonight, I'm trying to represent the whole village. Please support my amendment.
Right, thank you very much. Now we will take the vote. Do you want to do it by show of hands? No?
No, record it.
You want a recorded vote? Can you all make sure then that your cards are in properly? Right, it's open now for voting. Those that support the proposed amendment, and those on then that reject the amendment. So it's for or against. All right, that's the voting closed, but it takes a minute or two for it to be processed properly. Right. Sorry, sometimes if we're a little bit quick, it doesn't quite capture it properly. Right. For was 20. Against was 32. There was one abstention. The amendment is lost. So we now go back to the substantive motion. Okay, so we go to item 10, the substantive motion. Councillor Raffel, you like to
Well,
propose?
Madam Mayor, I have introduced it. I don't propose to say anything further unless anyone else speaks.
Right. Are there any that are wishing to speak on this now? So do you want to go straight to a vote?
Back to council.
Recorded vote again, please,
Councillor
Madam Mayor.
Rebecca Bean, did you wish to speak because you seconded the motion? You didn't indicate. Okay.
To a vote.
Okay, then we go to the vote.
Can we record?
Sorry. Right. What are they doing? Right, let's recorded vote again. Make sure that your cards are in. All right, and that is
For the
for
substantive motion.
the motion or
To make it.
against. All right, all the votes are in. Right, I'll announce it as soon as I've got the okay from the down there, the technology part. Okay, that was 433, against 20, no abstentions. The motion is carried and the plan is made. Right, we move on to item 11, which is the revenue and capital outturn. Councillor Tate to propose.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 11 is the 2015-16 Revenue and Capital Outturn Report. And within that report are 4 recommendations from Cabinet. That Council notes the revenue outturn for 2015-16, which was a net surplus of 626,000. That secondly, agree the carry-forward requests, new funding requests for strategic budgets, and the contributions to and from revenue reserves, as shown in the shaded areas of Appendix 1 and 1A and 1B of the report. Thirdly, that note any ongoing revenue impacts identified from a detailed review of the outturn will be included in budget monitoring reports for 2016-17 and the budget strategy for 17-18. And fourthly, to note that the capital outturn and agree the revised capital programme detailed in Appendix 8 of the report. By way of a little bit more detail for those who have not gone through the whole report, but firstly, the net revenue outturn was 626,000 under the latest budget, which consists of 99.8% of expenditure against forecast and 100.8% of income. And as a result, after £137,000 worth of carry forwards and 325,000 being moved to the interest risk reserve to replenish it in line with council financial policies, there was a remaining surplus of 163,000. By way of some detail on the 137,000 carry forwards, town centre planting will be 64,000, homelessness budget 31,000, housing strategy 30,000, and youth hub feasibility some 12,000. The remaining surplus of 163,000, it will be recommended that this is to provide additional resource for strategic budgets such as Manydown and Leisure Park. Moving to the final capital expenditure, which was 5.664 million at 81% of budget, with a surplus of 1.335 million, which consists of delayed expenditure of some 983,000 and 352,000 pounds of the savings. The delayed expenditure will be rephased and savings will be used to fund future capital schemes. Turning to the main capital programme, I'd like to identify some of the achievements within the capital programme for 15-16. There were 40 capital schemes which were commenced and completed. 202 mandatory disability grants were approved to support disabled residents moving to independent living. And in a little bit more detail, there were 124 bathroom adaptations, 48 stair lifts, 16 major adaptations, 3 ceiling hoists, 25 improvements to access. Secondly, in the capital programme, 262,000 was used as a loan to Sentinel Housing to secure 7 units under ESP to ensure reduction in the use of B&B for accepted homeless households. And thirdly, in parking and access, 9 new sites were investigated, 8 completed, including approximately 40 new parking slots added to another 100 which were completed, as well as 20 dropped curbs. The 2015 report, I believe, shows a successful management and control within the agreed budget. The early identification of savings and additional income at the midpoint of the year has meant Council has been able to fund grant extensions for disability facilities and support purchase of, as I said, of existing dwellings to provide temporary accommodation for those at risk of homelessness. And in the coming year, the focus will continue to endeavour to develop the accuracy of the forecast. However, in the coming year, there will be elements of the budget that remain outside of the control and immediate management, and such as interest rates movements, income from planning applications. Finally, I would like to add that in keeping with the strong financial management, the Council's bad debt collection has improved and places Basingstoke and Deane in the top 10 percentile of English local authorities. So my recommendation is to put forward is the recommendation, and I hope that it will be accepted by the Council. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Do you have... Councillor Reid, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right later? Okay. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In speaking on this paper, there are a couple of points I want to make, mainly around the choices being made of where money is being spent, and while understanding the context in which it's set, the extra spending and where you wish to spend it, I do just to note the amount of consultants who are going to benefit from that is a concern, as it is always a concern. More importantly, more substantively in terms of the document on page 141, I did note the final paragraph of that page, which states the issues with Festival Place and the lower revised budget due to reductions in the level forecast of income. Obviously, there is a context to that, in the context of Festival Place and in the context of rents and shops. It is a concern. It falls outside of this report, but it is something that this council, I think, needs to take seriously as to why that is the case. Obviously, in terms of the income received at the bottom there, it relates to the budget and the setting of the budget and what was expected set against what's come in. Nonetheless, the point remains, and having conversations importantly about the future of our town centre and the success of the town centre, we want to understand what underpins that particular point. And it is a matter I think should be taken up elsewhere, but nonetheless it's an important one to make.
Thank you. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I thank the portfolio holder and the officers for this this great budget and how it's turned out. I just have one question on 7.2, and you rightly highlighted the number of disabled facility grants that we provide. I wonder, perhaps in a written answer to the whole council, you could inform us of how many applications were made on that, rather than just the number that were delivered. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Reid, did you want to come back a seconder? Councillor Tate, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note the comments made about Festival Place. I do think it's worth referring to the fact that the revised budgets were due to the level of forecasting following external audit. Whilst I understand your point in terms of how revenue is accrued, it is as a result of external audit rather than the actual practice. However, your point about the revenue goes into a wider point here. This year and the coming year will be tricky years as we move forward into a different environment within the budgeting, where we have in past accrued good revenue from interest rates and external activities, which are now becoming more variable. So it will be a trickier period of time, but in specifically, I have to say that Festival Place whilst it's a concern, as you say, that is not the result of the particular information you've got in here. It's about the external audit.
Thank you. We'll now then put it to the vote. Those in favour, would you please raise your hands? Okay, and now those against, please. And that's carried. Right, now we go to item 12, the Treasury Management Annual Report. Councillor Tate to propose.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. This item is the Treasury Management Report for 2015-16 and contains two recommendations that Council note the Treasury Management Annual Report, which includes the prudential indicator actuals for 15-16, and that the capital financing requirement and the minimum revenue provision requirement are both nil. Just by way of some comments, the key to start is that over £3 million of earnings are from interest from investments and cash, and this is a fundamental source of income to the Council. Any movement within that has impacts throughout our activities. And in 2015, there are some key points. Firstly, net interest and investment income was 3.08 million against a budget of 3.15, with an adverse variance of 68,000. And that forecast shortfall will be met from the interest rate risk reserve. You should also note that the budget was revised from 3.5 million following a transfer of 350,000 from the interest rate reserve in December 2015, which was approved by Council. Income from strategic investments was 61,000 lower than estimated, mainly due to externally managed funds, which were some 76,000 lower than estimated. Income from operational investments was 48,000 lower than estimated due to continuing low interest rate returns. And income from cash was 32,000 higher than forecast due to the higher than expected cash balances. So in terms of our overall position, the return for the year was 1.8% versus an estimate of 1.86%. Strategic investments returned 2.29%, operational investments 1.45%, and liquidity cash 0.44%. Despite the lower returns, it should be noted that the return remains higher than most, if not nearly all other local authorities average, whilst being achieved with one of the lowest levels of risk amongst English local authorities. Finally, all types of investment remained within the agreed strategy target and complied with the Council's capital financing requirements and the minimum revenue position. I would like to thank the Treasury Management team for the work, even though it was below forecast in 2015-16. The landscape for interest has changed dramatically in the last few months, and it will continue to be a challenge for them in the current and the coming years to ensure that this important stream of revenue for the Council performs as well as can be expected. I look forward to continuing the strong performance from the team to ensure that these returns remain possible. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Reid, do you wish to speak now or later? Nobody's indicated they want to speak, so we'll go straight to the vote. Sorry, Councillor Gardner, and you don't even have to say Popley.
I have to be quick, I know. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Audit and Accounts Committee did review this paper as well, which we were required to note. We noted the shortfall against budget, and we questioned the assumptions that were used in setting that budget, which had assumed that interest rates could only go one way, and that was up. This now looks a little less likely, and for future budgets, we recommended that officers should make no assumption of a rate rise and have plans in place to protect future income in the event of a rate reduction, other than relying on the interest rate reserve. And I personally would support the increase in the use of the diversified credit funds to get a long-term increase in our revenue. and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak, or we'll now go to the vote then? Okay. Oh, sorry, you need to sum up first, don't you? I'm just keeping looking at the time. Oh, sorry.
It's for
You've got-
noting rather than voting. It just
Sorry?
says we note it, so we don't need to vote.
All right. You want to just have... Yeah. But I think Councillor Tate wants to sum up then.
No, it's
No,
fine.
that's okay?
Yeah.
Good. All right, noted. Move on. Can I say I like that? All right, item 13 then is the Community Infrastructure Levy. Councillor Raffel to propose.
Madam Mayor, I beg to propose this recommendation. The recommendation is set out somewhere on the extra paper. Thank you. It is at 13, obviously. There's 4 parts there. Members can have that in mind. Thank you. We had a very healthy and helpful discussion at EPH where relevant considerations were brought forward by members from all parties, and I wish to thank them. And I also wish to apologise to Councillor Mrs James, who brought up a relevant consideration in yesterday's EPH, and I may have misunderstood what she was saying at the time. The chairman quite properly said I was misunderstood. I'm sorry. It's good work by the committee, bringing relevant concerns to all of our attention. This is new for all of us. I think collectively we've agreed that we need to get it in place so that we can reap the dividends, but we need to keep a very strong and clear watching eye on how it develops to make sure that there aren't iniquities or disproportionate effects occurring on either applicants or developers in ways that we weren't expecting. I have said, and I shall say again, that we will be bringing back to committee for consideration both the collection mechanism, which is likely to be subject to regulations, and the committee may have limited input to that, but also the spending mechanism, where I suspect the committee will have quite a bit to say, especially those from the more urban parts of Basingstoke where they are unparished, and quite keen they will be to make sure that the benefits still are spent in their parish where there are developments within those parishes, and as the point made last night is concerned, where there are neighbouring parishes or neighbouring communities where infrastructure needs to be upgraded, possibly in the context of regeneration, then those communities will want to be looking to see whether they can reap the benefits from SIL as well. So I make this recommendation to the Council. I hope you feel confident enough to allow this to go forward for consultation. The consultation will take place from August through to the end of September. It will then come back, and if there are minor tweaks that need to be made, so be it. It will then go off for examination at the end of the year and hopefully come back, or be examined at the beginning of next year and come back from the inspector in the spring for implementation in the middle of next year. It's a process that we are familiar with, but hopefully this time round for this particular item we'll get it right and it will go in one go to the inspector and come back. So I hope I have a seconder. I have.
I was just going to ask for a seconder, thank you. And that's Councillor Jack Smith. Okay. Do you want to speak now or reserve till later? Leave later. Later, yeah? Okay, then we'll go. Councillor Gary Watts. Then it would be Councillor Hannah Golding, and then Paul Harvey, and then Councillor Keith Watts. Oh, and Councillor Andy McCormick. Yes, I can see you in the corner there. All right, so the first one then is Gary Watts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this paper. Time is of an essence, Madam Mayor. Any planning development approved before we adopt a SIL policy developers will not pay any SIL monies towards those developments, so make more pressures on the 106. So it's essential that we get policy in place as soon as possible. We're in quite a precarious position, Madam Mayor. 3 years ago, the Three Dragons made when they came to the committee, we thought on this side they were setting the SIL levels too low. So then we've had a slight economic recovery, so they've increased all the SIL levels across the board. But now we're coming into uncertain times with Brexit and impending gloom, as everybody predicts. So we need to get a move on. And there's many aspects of this SIL document that I don't actually support. I mean, the flatted developments, no SIL. I think we're going to encourage flatted developments, more flatted developments in the town. We don't know what other areas are doing, what their SIL policy is to do with flatted areas. So I'd like a bit more research on that, but hopefully that can come forward in other reports. Permitted developments, we're still not going to get any contributions from SIL or 106. That's going to have a big impact on the infrastructure for where those developments happen. No SIL for affordable homes for 11 dwellings or below. I mean, again, that's centralisation, what governments do of all perspectives. So it's very disappointing. With strategic sites, even with the SIL, if we adopt this SIL policy, we're going to have 75 million shortfall. It's a colossal amount of money to find. I mean, in the Hatchwire and Begwood area where I particularly live, there's going to be 2,000 homes, and there's no money. The money, 12 million, has been allocated for A30 and the Kempshot roundabout. We haven't got that 12 million. So it's really important that we get this adopted. Looking forward, I'm looking forward to now we have a new Chancellor. He can maybe make some of those shortfalls up. Now they're jettisoning the Osborne austerity budget. So I'm looking forward to the Conservatives loosening the coffers and giving Basingstoke and the Dean the money they deserve to put the infrastructure in place. So I support this paper. Thank you.
Councillor Hannah Golding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Community Infrastructure Levy is a vital source of funding for much needed infrastructure throughout our borough over the whole local plan period. This infrastructure is required to support our planned growth, and it's set out in the Infrastructure Delivery Plan. Of course, SIL isn't the only source that will support this infrastructure, and indeed it will work along other sources like the New Homes Bonus, the LEP, Hampshire County Council and the government, whatever their new budget is. However, there is still a funding gap of approximately £113 million that needs to be filled. And without SIL receipts, this funding gap would be around £40 million larger, and therefore it is vital that the Borough Council gets the SIL in place as soon as possible. As the portfolio holder has already outlined, the EPH committee last week did identify a number of areas that we would like to see investigated. And one issue in particular that is of interest to me is how local communities without parishes will get a say in how that money is spent. As a member for Brighton Hill, which does not have a parish council, I want to make sure that my residents have a significant say in how any infrastructure funding available to them is spent. I am therefore very pleased that this is already on the EPH work programme for later in the year, and it is a discussion where I am confident we can have cross-party support to make sure that we get the details of how we use the SIL money right, so that no part of Basingstoke and Dean, whether they have a parish or not, ends up at a disadvantage. However, this is not the issue we are dealing with tonight. This paper sets out a draft charging schedule. It's a good concept and it's based on a sound report. SIL will be vital to support future growth in our borough, and I would therefore urge everybody to support this proposal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The debate at EPH was a very good discussion, and I think it raised a lot of issues, as already been said, about the paper, about the concerns, but also about the reality of where we need to take this. And I appreciate the comments of the Cabinet member, let alone those that are speaking before me on this, and also the point about the three-step approach. This is the first step along the way to this, and there are more elements of this that need to be put in place. So I think it's important to recognise the Cabinet agreeing to take it in that way, and also the committee's role in shaping that as we do get the papers to come through, we do see what is being proposed, the detail of it, and then we can look at it, and from a ward point of view, that is important. On occasion, we've known how other funds have been reshaped around strategic priorities, and money has gone from necessarily local communities into much bigger agendas. That was justified before in different ways. Again, this one we need to think about the balance here between local communities, the impact of development on local communities and their needs set against the bigger strategic pots that of course are equally under stress and strain. Local infrastructure in a ward is one thing, dealing with the roundabouts and the roads is also an issue. There isn't enough money to go round. We know that, the funding gap is there. This is not a panacea. This isn't going to result in a tick-the-box exercise where we get what we want and we see it delivered. There are some pretty significant challenges, not least the loss of European funding and how that will then be replaced. How will we see government deal with all of those issues that do relate to infrastructure funding? Manydown is important in this. It's been suggested that Manydown could take a CIL charge now. We also want to be absolutely clear that in doing so, we do not put at risk in any way, shape or form the commitment to 40% affordable housing. I notice Councillor Isaac is smiling at me. You would not expect us not to say that. We're going to hold your feet to the fire on that to make sure that it's delivered. You've given the commitment, and we will absolutely assuredly keep you to that. Because it matters, it really does. If we're changing the funding formulas, and we're saying the values can cope with it, then they really do need to cope with it so that we don't give up the things that we do aspire to and we want to see delivered. Manydown is an important project. It is something that we can aspire to, all of us, and so we want to see those aspirations fulfilled. But also, and this is the important bit, the difficulty of this CIL fund, and many of the councils have found this, it's the payoff between Section 106 and CIL. It's the balance between the two that becomes increasingly difficult for not only developers to navigate, but local councils to collect against, deliver against, and then see the actual infrastructure you want delivered. You may have the money, but even then you may not. But delivering the actual infrastructure so that residents can actually see the money making a difference to them. It isn't straightforward, and I do not underestimate the challenges we face. So yeah, I think the Cabinet's constructive approach, the way that it was approached at the committee, was to be absolutely commended. It is a cross-party view. We've got concerns. You had concerns about the two idea of the two markets, the simplicity of that. All of that was raised. I guess the pressure's on. How are we going to square this circle now going up over the next 6 or 7 months and hopefully maintain the level of cross-party engagement on this so all our residents can benefit?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Next one is Councillor Keith Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I support the recommendation that, as Paul has pointed out, the Section 106 regulations sit side by side with that, and they've changed, and I'm concerned that they're not being followed. So if I could refer to page 228 of the report. 3 tests have to be set out. The expenditure is necessary to make a development acceptable in planning terms. It's directly related to the development and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to a development. Now, there are a number of examples. It's undermining confidence in the population when buildings go up and there's no sign of the Section 106 expenditure. Landscaping in Leverstoke is not directly related to a house building in the middle of Whitchurch. And I'd like to ask that when the Section 106 pro forma is drawn up, can we ask that the officers explain the justification for their claim that the recommendations meet these 3 tests? Why is it necessary to make this development acceptable? How is it directly related to this development? That's not happening at the moment. It's undermining the confidence, and frankly I'm going to actually suggest that developers don't pay if it doesn't go to Whitchurch. So can we have that addition to the processes, please?
Thank you. Now, Councillor Andy McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I was just looking at page 388 in this monster report and all the massive infrastructure schemes we've got coming up in the next few years. And this isn't my first time on the council. Some of you with long memories will recall I came on in 2002 and we were talking about a lot of those schemes back then, and a lot of them still haven't been delivered now. I'm very pleased though that we did manage to get £100 million or thereabouts of money spent in the Popley area while I was on the council. I'm a bit disappointed that we're having to revisit those again and upgrade them again. I think there's some lessons that we can learn from that. That when we're looking at infrastructure improvements, we look at things and don't try and do things in half measures. Otherwise, less than 10 years down the line, we look at further upgrades on the upgrades. A lot's been said about the funding shortfall, and it's a cause of concern for me as well. Just having a look at some of those schemes, £10 million was spent on the Blackdown roundabout, and yet we're looking at £8.5 million for Winchester Road and the Thornycroft roundabouts, and I don't honestly believe that's going to be enough to do those. So in addition to the £113 million gap already identified, I imagine we're going to be finding bigger gaps going through. So with that in mind, I would be welcome to hear any suggestions from the Leader and the Cabinet as to how we might meet these funding gaps from Hampshire, the Local Economic Partnership, developers and central government. Because at the end of the day, these are vital infrastructure improvements. Certainly when we're looking at the 2,000 houses that are going to be put in place in the southwest of town, and the entire A30 corridor needing upgrading, not least the Brighton Hill roundabout, which is a passion of mine, Winchester Road roundabout and Thornycroft roundabout. A lot of people use that to get into town, a lot of people use that to get to their work every day. So I would be welcome to hear any suggestions as to how we might close this funding gap and keep Basingstoke moving and the economy working. Thank you.
Thank you, and that was Councillor Andy McCormick's return maiden speech. Okay, now Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm on the committee, and I agree with my fellow councillors. The cross-party work that we have done over the last couple of weeks has been really important. I say to the portfolio holder, there's an opportunity to use the brains that's on that committee to formulate the SIL, how it works, how we spend the money, where the impact is, and to use the levy where it has, that development has the greatest impact is felt. It's an important piece of work. I encourage it to be done quickly because we will miss out on monies to this council and an ability to improve the infrastructure within the borough. So I hope this hastens it on and that we can get on with it because it's an important issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think we now come back to the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You'll have had a flavour tonight of the discussions we had last week at EPH, the cross-party agreement. We were, as a committee, broadly supportive of SIL and alive to the need to see it introduced sooner rather than later. There are a couple of areas, that some of which have been highlighted tonight, that we think need looking at, need to be part of the consultation. The modelling, we had some concerns about being a bit too simple in places. Concerns Councillor Watts has highlighted about wholly flat developments, many down as well. And as already been said, and building on Councillor Ratting's point, there will be a paper coming back in March to the committee to look at how we administer the funds, to look at how we spend it, make sure we're spending it in the right place in the right way, and particularly dealing with Councillor Golding's point, which affects my own ward of Winklebury, of the non-parished areas, but those that are particularly impacted by some of the development we'll be seeing coming forward. As a whole, though, the committee recognised the importance of getting the SIL in place, getting that money to bridge that gap, that infrastructure deficit that we have, and the SIL will be a crucial form of that, so I'm delighted to second the motion.
Thank you very much. Do you want to now sum up?
Madam Mayor, well, can I thank all councillors for their comments, and they are all helpful again, and I hope you'll support the motion.
That's the kind of speech I like. All right, we now take the vote by show of hands. All those for? Unanimous then. Right, now we go to item 14, which is calendar of meetings. Is that agreed? Right, item 15, we've got notice of motion, and the Councillor Westbrook, Councillor Mr. Westbrook, would you like to propose?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, both the wording and the reason for this motion are very clear. EU citizens living in Basingstoke-on-Deane not only work here, they run businesses from here, their children go to school here, and they contribute hugely to our community and are valued members of society. We're all concerned that recent comments made within national political debates may have increased the anxiety felt by EU citizens living in the UK and also British citizens living in the EU. This language may have had the effect of putting the residency rights of EU citizens in doubt. Full Council can play its part in giving these residents certainty of their position. Now, I believe this isn't about the rights and wrongs of a referendum or how people chose to vote, but more about the fallout from that referendum and some of the consequences of that on Basingstoke, who, along with the rest of Britain, are going to have to adapt to a life outside of the European Union. There is anxiety for the 3 million EU citizens who have made their homes in the UK and the 1.2 million British citizens living in other EU countries. David Cameron's statement that there would be no immediate changes to their status would have been less than fully reassuring. Business groups are urging action to confirm that EU nationals working in the UK have the right to continue living here, both because it's the fair thing to do and because their skills are crucial to the success of many British businesses and to our vital public services at this time of uncertainty. EU nationals make up 5% of our NHS staff and 10% of our registered doctors within the UK. It's easy to see how this could begin to fragment our society. We all know someone from the EU doing the same job as us, living in the same streets, and their children attending the same school as ours, and all that uncertainty of not knowing if they can still remain here. How does it make you feel that our friends, neighbours and workmates might have to leave the country? One lady came to England from Europe 20 years ago, and Britain became her home. Not the one she was born in, but the one she chose. Now, for the first time in many years, she does not feel welcome here. It's not a matter of her saying, OK, I will go back home, because her home is here. People have built their lives here, they've studied, worked, met someone, set up their homes, had children and paid their taxes. They're your teammates in sport, they're your volunteers in your community centres. This has the real potential to tear families apart and alter our communities for the worse. They are part of our communities and they deserve better than this. Former Home Secretary, now Prime Minister Theresa May, who borderline backed staying in the EU, has been criticised, rightly in my opinion, including by many of our own MPs, for failing to guarantee EU citizens already in the UK the right to remain. She has said the issue will play a part in negotiations with the EU as the UK maps out its withdrawal. Are the government seriously considering using EU citizens as bargaining chips in any negotiations? All of this will give absolutely no security or reassurance to our residents waiting to hear something positive from the government. People from across the political spectrum, including from those who campaign for Britain to leave the EU, have called on the government to guarantee their status before the summer recess. Doing so would help with the urgent task of bringing our country back together and help to stamp out the nasty repatriation campaigns I'm ashamed to see happening in our country. Parliament can choose to do this without waiting for negotiations. I would like to think that all members in this council would support our motion asking the leader to write to the Prime Minister, as it would send a really positive message to all our residents that this full council are 100% behind their friends and neighbours from the EU being allowed to remain here without fear.
Right, thank you. Councillor Harvey, your second. Do you want to speak now or... Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our motion tonight seeks to send out a clear message to those members of our community originally from the European Union countries that we believe they should be entitled to stay here despite the Brexit vote, that they should not be pawns in some larger negotiation. I mean, these are people's lives and their families that we're talking about. They're not statistics, they're not some tools in a political deal to be done. We wanted to really respect their humanity in this situation. And indeed, we want to respect that there are people living abroad who are from Basingstoke who equally deserve to allow to stay in the countries that they've chosen to stay in and make their homes. These are residents here in our borough. There are work colleagues, there are people running small businesses, there are people living next door, there are people who children go to our local schools. They are, like everyone else, people who contribute to our local community. They are our local community. I also want to say that we reject the racism and the xenophobia that we have seen unleashed through the referendum campaign and after it. I want to challenge us to be human and to respect people. The UKIP poster during that campaign was a disgrace. It was racist, and it was far more about hate. We are better than that. And I want to say to all those people who live in our borough, who originally came from EU countries, we will stand against the racists and the xenophobes with you and with everyone else that champions tolerance. Now, the issue really is the uncertainty, and it's the uncertainty that people face as a result of the Brexit vote that is the issue. That's the bit that's terrible about this. Not knowing if you're welcome anymore, as Councillor Westbrook has already said, people have genuinely expressed that feeling. Not knowing whether you're going to have a job in the long run, or whether you need to apply to stay through a new system that might be introduced, the concerns that that raises. What about the impact on your children and how that will be, how will that impact the family issues? It's not just about the rights they have or the responsibilities that we have, it is about the relationships and the sense of community that we have established. So we want to send out a very clear message here, a very clear message, especially to the new Prime Minister. Please do not play games with people's lives. Commit now to ensuring that all residents who have come from an EU country can stay without question, without qualification. About 10 years ago, a councillor stood up in this chamber and asked of us how many of us at the time come from Basingstoke. And 3 people put their hands up. 3 people out of the 60 of us put their hands up saying they actually came from Basingstoke. He then said, how many of you have come to Basingstoke? And the rest of the chamber put its hand up. Such is the nature of our borough, such is the nature of Basingstoke and Dean. So let's celebrate that sense of inclusiveness and openness that attracts people to make a better life in our borough, to make their home, to live their lives and to be a part of our community. Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate multicultural Basingstoke, and let's be positive about this and send that message to the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. The next one is Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After the country, and indeed the borough, voted to leave the European Union in the referendum on the 23rd of June, the status of the 3 million EU nationals living in the UK has become a key point, as has the status of the 1.2 million UK expats living in the EU. The government has stated their confidence in gaining an agreement that allows EU migrants to continue living in the UK and those UK citizens to remain living in the EU. Indeed, it was discussed at the meeting of the EU's 27 foreign ministers only 4 days ago. It has been widely acknowledged that EU nationals are vital to the success of our economy, and I believe this is particularly true here in Basingstoke. I firmly believe that those members of our community who voted to leave the EU voted for a future with fair but controlled immigration, fair to those who are already here, and fair to all the talents across the world in non-EU countries. It is also right to make clear that I believe that both local campaigners and those who supported the campaign locally did not vote to legitimise racism and xenophobia. As believers in democracy, it is more than fair to say we are all leavers now. We should all support this motion in its intent to clarify the residency status of EU citizens living in the UK and of British citizens living in the EU as soon as possible. It is a fact of the human condition that significant change and uncertainty will always cause anxiety and fear, but only when definition and understanding is given to exactly what the change is do the people impacted impacted move to acceptance and commit to new plans, or indeed relief that the changes do not have any direct impact on them. So I urge all members of this chamber to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'm just going to take 30 seconds of your time. My husband passed away 5 years ago, just now, and he'd be very proud to hear everybody saying that we should be together. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, Councillor Keith Watts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can honestly say that I'm heartbroken that my two great-grandsons won't be growing up in the prosperous, influential, open country that they're born into. Obviously, I support this motion. That they have a foreign surname because one of their other great-grandfathers came here more than 50 years ago. And as a family, of course, they're well embedded in the Devon community, and I don't think anybody really notices slightly humorous surname in English terms. A lot of what I would have said has been said, Councillor Westbrook in particular. You can't negotiate over people the way you can negotiate over turnips. And every person involved is in a family, is employed somewhere and in a community, and all of those relationships would be affected by being wrested from this community. So it's not a matter of negotiation, it's a matter of humanity and loyalty to say that these people who committed themselves to living in this country and have contributed should stay here. I don't think there's anything else I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watts. Councillor Andy McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a speech I hoped I'd never have to make, but thanks to the inadequacies of Jeremy Corbyn, Tim Fallon and David Cameron, we're now leaving the EU, and there's not a lot we can do about it now. I'd like to point out one outstanding example of how a EU citizen has made an outstanding contribution to British life. This week we saw the sale of Arm, one of our last great British tech firms, to Japanese telecom firm SoftBank for £24 billion. Arm will be delisted from the stock exchange. Under British rules, the management are powerless to resist this. It was made possible by Brexit and the devaluation of the pound, so anyone who thinks there aren't any implications for Brexit is sorely mistaken. Arm was founded by Herman Hauser. Arm's a good customer of my firm, by the way, so I'm thinking I ought to have declared an interest, but it won't be material to this discussion. I'm just using it as an example. But Herman Hauser founded Arm 30 years ago, and he's originally from Austria. And I'd like to think that people like Herman Hauser, who make such an outstanding contribution, founding a firm that cost £24 billion, are welcome in the UK, and that we recognise their contribution. 5 years ago, when I left Basingstoke, I was made redundant. I moved up to Yorkshire to take up a better job. I let my house to a Polish family. While I was up in Yorkshire, people up in Yorkshire are very friendly, but there are some who don't like outsiders. And the sentiments about outsiders were writ large over the Brexit campaign. We had a lot of messages about taking control of our borders, and shortly after the result, we saw a national front street stall in Newcastle saying, "Stop immigration, start repatriation." And we've had it in Basingstoke as well. What happened to Simika Teacher was utterly appalling. So I thought the National Front had died out years ago. When I was a boy growing up in Basingstoke, we used to see racist graffiti in places like underpasses about the NF. I thought we left all that behind 30 years ago. This touches all of us. And my own personal example, people that I know have started businesses. I let my house to a Polish family. I've got a colleague who's got a German wife. My dad's got a house in Spain. The NHS has got 10% of its doctors from EU countries. These things touch all of us. So we need a strong message from this council to EU nationals resident in this country. Your contribution is valued and you are still welcome here. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It'd be no surprise that I'm speaking in support of this very important motion, and I think it's very important we send out this message, and I thank Councillor Westbrook for bringing it to this chamber. I come from a background where I believe that nobody's life chances should be defined where they were born. And if someone locally needed to travel, to learn, to reach their full potential, I would encourage them to do so, and I want no barriers in the way. And if someone needed to work overseas to hone those skills and develop them further, or take them to a place they're required, they should absolutely be welcome to do so and encouraged to do so. And it doesn't matter whether that person comes from Basingstoke or whether that person comes from Bucharest or Budapest, the same rules should apply. For too long in this country, we've blamed everything on immigration. A housing crisis is blamed on immigration when actually it's because we haven't built enough homes. We keep blaming the fact that some people can't find work because of immigration, when in fact it's because we haven't given people the right skills and the right training. We've allowed the private sector to avoid investing in training. The reality is this country is so much richer and better for its immigration from across the world, but particularly the EU. The closest dentist to this building is the dentist in Chequers Road. It's my local dentist. Half the people in that dental surgery at any one time are EU migrants. The other half we call patients. That surgery would not exist without EU migration. And it's a good job they're here, because at one point we had a shortage of NHS dentists. Thanks to the EU, we haven't. My son's teacher last year was an EU migrant. She did a fantastic job. He thoroughly enjoyed his school with her. She brought something to the community and invested in our view for the future. We are so much better for immigration, and particularly from the EU. During the referendum campaign, I was regularly fed some amazing sausages from the stall next door, produced by a Lithuanian chap who runs that stall. Again, a charming man, made a massive contribution to this country and indeed to our market that otherwise would be dying. So I think it's very important we send a very loud and clear message. I'm not going to make too many comments on racism, because most racist comments are made by those who are too ignorant. They need help, they need training, and I'll probably bump into them in due course over the next few weeks in court. I'm more concerned about politicians who make effectively racist remarks, such as they're bargaining chips in negotiations. That's absolutely wrong. Regardless of what happens to Brits aboard, it would not hurt the Prime Minister, and in fact I would expect of the Prime Minister to turn around and say, those who have come to this country, made a contribution to this country, living in this country, you're welcome to stay, we need you to stay, we want you to stay. You're now part of the fabric of our diverse society, and as I say, our diverse society makes us all richer, particularly in Basingstoke. So I welcome the motion. I think it's very important we put a united front and make sure it's absolutely sent to the Prime Minister to stop all this nonsense of uncertainty which is destroying family lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a subject, by the way, I support this motion. I've got no problem with it at all. Having worked in Brussels for 10 years gives me a slightly funny viewpoint on a lot of this. There were people from the EU, which is a title that's been picked up by politicians. I don't know who they are, and I agree with Councillor Gavin James about what he was mentioning. People were coming from European countries to the UK a lot longer before the EU existed. Let's go back to the end of World War II. Who were the countries that supported this country? Poles, Czechs, French. Many of them, after World War II, settled here. When I joined the Air Force, my boss was a Czech. He had adopted this country. Then they invented the EU. In 1955, 40 years later, they invented a thing called Schengen. Schengen was the free movement of people, 21 years ago. I was in Brussels at the time. That's when this free movement started to go back and forth, and that's when these kind of discussions started. But it had started years, decades before that. And people from the European countries had settled here, were accepted here, had set up businesses here, had become our neighbors. in the a bit later on, when I lived in Peterborough, I had a neighbour, young family. They were Italian, 5th generation. Why did they come to this country? They came to this country in 1890 to build railways. The whole collection of Italians in the Midlands built railways. They never went home. They stayed here. It's not a new discussion. We've accepted this. What politicians have picked up is this slightly deviant excuse of using the 21 years of the Schengen Agreement and this whole vote. I think it's been totally distorted. We have already had people in this country in quite exceptional circumstances, and they've all been accepted. It's nothing new. I don't know who those people are. I'd like to shoot them personally, but I support this motion. I think it's probably, I don't know what the negotiations are going to be. Who is? Me? Not really. I'll tell you why I won't retract that. I'm half American. I belong to the NRA in California. Madam Mayor, I just wanted to put some perspective on this. Thank you very much, and good luck with the motion.
Sorry. Next then is Councillor Cubitt. Sorry, Councillor, but you weren't recognised to speak, and you always stand and speak to the Mayor, and I've noticed that others have been doing that, so if we can have a little bit of order, please. Councillor Cubitt.
Well, all I was going to say is that I absolutely support this motion. I find it really quite offensive that there's a conflation being made between the 52% of the people who voted to leave the EU for various reasons, but predominantly to regain control of our country, and to accuse them all of being racist, I find quite offensive. And the comments that were being made about ARM and the depreciation of sterling. I mean, I gather ARM's acquisition's is about to fall through. So I mean, you're behind the curve already. Anyway, all I was going to say is that I just think it's offensive to accuse everybody of being racist, and I support the motion nonetheless.
Thank you, Councillor Colin Regan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be a few words tonight, but picking up on what Councillor Miller said about after the war, there was many of the people from Eastern Europe stayed, and I didn't go back to Uncle Joe, did they? Really, what it was, but they welcome and they fitted in society. But what's happened during the EU referendum campaign? Race was a big card. We couldn't hide from it. When they had such a close result of a few percent, it was the anti-immigration vote, in my opinion, that tipped the balance to leave. And the pro-Leave people played that card to the full. And now we've opened a Pandora's box of people thinking like less educated or more emotional. We're going to say, they're still here. We voted to leave. I voted to leave because there's immigration. But they're still here. So why it's not happening? You know, and so that's a dangerous situation we're in now, actually. And Theresa May was wrong to play that card, actually. But just to finish, and I will be short, as I said I will be short, I know two people who are actually from Europe, who've built their lives here, one from Finland and one from Poland. I mean, their whole history tells them that xenophobia has destroyed people's lives in them countries. And they are feeling terribly insecure because history is resting on their shoulders. It's passed this motion and given assurance that we want them here to continue living here, and they're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Jonathan Richards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I just have a very brief comment. First of all, I'll be quite open. I support the motion. That's very clear. Having myself been a migrant in two other countries, one of which was another EU country,
I know the feeling that when you first get there, you know, how are you going to be accepted? Will you be accepted? And there are certain anxieties around that. But when I read the words of this motion and what I've heard being said this evening, fortunately you're all in agreement with the motion, that's absolutely fine. But the words anxiety, increased anxiety and so on, and I think someone else mentioned despondency. I heard last week a prominent, eminent BBC presenter talking about or referring to this summer of discontent. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of negativism in this country right now since the 24th of June. Inevitable, perhaps, but I do think that we should try and step forward, look more positive at the whole thing, because there is anxiety everywhere. We just have to get over that. The reassurance that this council may give to EU residents is one thing, businesses, whatever, all sorts of other areas where we can perhaps give some support. But I would just urge everyone to try and be a little bit more positive in thinking and to think of the future and the good things that are certainly to come. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We'd actually just run out of the 20 minutes. However, Councillor Rattigan, you did put up, so I'm prepared to draw the line after you then. As long as you make it short, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, I try to keep everything short in that. I'd like to thank the Labour councillors for bringing this motion. It is very worthy of being supported. Finally, I just want to say the only NRA that we as a council, as a borough, should think about is no racists allowed.
Right. Thank you. Then, do you want to do your closing statement, Westbrook? Or Councillor Mr. Westbrook?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank all members for their contribution during this debate. I have to say, I think this would be the perfect moment for the leader to assert his influence to someone just stepping into the role of PM. A perfect opportunity to set down a marker for Basingstoke residents who now find their lives being held in a state of limbo. I'm really struggling to imagine what it must have felt like to have woken up on the morning of June the 24th, not knowing what effect this was going to have on your life, with your plans for your future in disarray. Having to question, is my job safe? Should I invest in my business? Are my children still able to continue in their school? All pretty big questions that we would all ask ourselves placed in the same position, a position we would not want to find ourselves in. Just think how you would feel if you were in that position. Please think about that when you cast your vote tonight. Let's face it, the government didn't expect us to leave and made no plans for it. How can we answer these important questions? Even the Prime Minister didn't have the answers to the questions and chose to resign rather than face them or try to solve them. Even this week, the new Prime Minister has announced a brand new role. A Secretary of State for exiting the European Union has been created. Having listened closely to his initial plan for EU citizens living here in Britain, it instantly became obvious there isn't one. So what advice has been given to EU nationals? Well, none that actually helps, I would suggest. The former Foreign Secretary said it would be absurd to guarantee EU nationals currently living in the United Kingdom the right to remain in Britain for as long as they liked following the Brexit vote. Comments like this will have increased the anxiety, which Councillor Richards talked about, felt by the EU citizens currently living in the UK and many also British citizens living in the EU. To suggest that their status is somehow subject to the results of the negotiations only adds to the current uncertainty. An uncertainty that's affecting our residents now, not in 2017 or 2019, or whenever the Minister for Exit decides, but right now. What this motion is saying, at the very least, amongst all of the uncertainties that lay ahead, is give our friends and neighbours who came here from across Europe our unequivocal support this evening. We should try our best to give them the certainty they need by asking the leader to write to the Prime Minister, saying that we as a council recognise the enormous benefit that they bring to our everyday lives, and they will always be welcome to remain here for as long as they choose. I sincerely hope the Prime Minister has learnt from the past and that she has no desire to return to something like her shameful go-home ban scheme, which she later described as too blunt an instrument. In the public's opinion, it was a step too far. I hope that all EU citizens settled here will continue to be our workmates, our employers, our neighbours and our friends, to stay living amongst us because they're part of us. Please support this motion.
Thank you. We've come to 9:30, and with your agreement, members, we have got some important matters still to talk about. So I'd like to extend it to 10 p.m. Are you agreed? Okay. Right. I'm just looking for my next
Do you
list.
want to put that to the vote to make sure everyone's agreed?
Yes. Just been reminded we should put it to the vote to make sure that you all. So just raise your hands then, please.
If they support the motion.
Just till 10 o'clock.
Okay, fine. And then do they support the motion?
Right. And now, while your hands are up, do you support the motion? Right. I think that again is unanimous, which is brilliant and a good message to send out to our residents. Right. Oops. Right now, number 16, item 16, which is the motion from Councillor James. Would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Development is coming forward in our borough, and it has done for some time without landowners and house builders paying this council commuted sums. Why is that? Developers are choosing not to offer open space and roads for adoption. Developers are passing on the costs of maintaining their roads and their environments to residents in direct charges. The residents still pay this council and the county council for the delivery of the same services in their council tax. This is double taxation. Council tax is increasing, as we have seen this year, and it is set to increase year on year. Across this chamber, members in all parties have been faced with casework where residents are struggling to afford to pay these private management companies. The standard of service delivered by management companies is often poor, and we have seen the contracts of these companies sold on time and time again. This council has increased the amount we charge for commuted sums in 106 agreements year on year. In this year's budget, the cost for grass cutting went up 25%. The cost for planting has gone up 22%. The cost for play areas has increased by 20%, and litter bins has gone up 27%. An application came forward last month for Chapel Hill, nearly 600 new homes in the town centre. It was one of our key partners, Sentinel Housing Association, are going to introduce management charges for the homes on this site. They will not offer the roads and or the environment for adoption. It is worrying that we see a social landlord choose to impose these charges on residents in this development. At the Development Control meeting, there was unanimous support from all sides for an informative opposing such a move by Sentinel. We need to also understand why developers are not offering the environment and the road for adoption. What motivates them? We have been saying for a long time that we need to know where the sites where management companies operate are in our borough. We need to map and scope the problem and what the residents are being charged. We need to look at our internal charges to ensure that they are reflective of the actual cost. If we do not like the practice of developers, then we should look at what we can do, and that is in our powers, for those residents who also do not like what is being done to them. It has been said that where developers do offer the environment, where they do not offer the environment or the roads for adoption, those houses are cheaper. We know from our experience and have seen on sites like Highfields in Buckskin that this is not the case. House prices in Basingstoke are not cheap. Even if it was the case that it makes houses cheaper, which we know it does not, the next person that buys the house would not benefit because the management charges are placed on the property in perpetuity. no matter how many times the house is sold on. How do we make housing affordable? It is not by adding additional charges. We need to play our part in helping our residents on this important issue. For our part, as a local authority, we need to make sure that the services we offer are good and something that developers want to buy into with a commuted sum that is reasonable. And we've got to make sure that we take pride in the service that we offer the places that we live, so that developers feel that it is attractive for the borough council to maintain the environment and for the county at the moment, and I hope it's at the moment, to maintain the roads. We need developers not to be burdened by the existing and future charges. Please support this motion.
Councillor Tilbury, do you want to speak now or? Right, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just I'll try to keep this brief. Oh, Gavin's gone anyway. I raised this 2 years ago for Foxdown. You know, you may recall where we came across a situation where we had 75 houses and they were having to pay these service charges, and this was sort of came as news to me, and then it turned out that Highfields are having the same problem in Buckskin. Well, since then, at Foxdown, they've still not taken over the management company. In fact, they may have done it last night. They had an extraordinary general meeting to take over the running of the estate from them. But of course, it isn't just the estate. It's in this case, the roads there are actually adopted by Hampshire County Council, but in a lot of areas they're not. The other problem we have is for the housing association residents is they have no say in this whatsoever because they are not landowners. Because the only people who are allowed to do it, the shareholders, are the people who own the land. So that's either the housing association, and in this particular scheme, 30% affordable housing. They have quite a big say there. The absentee landlords who own the buy-to-let properties on there. And then there's the actual residents there. So you have this sort of odd situation where people have very little control over what's going on and over the charges there. That was bad enough. I thought that was a bit of an oddity. It was a one-off, and it was particularly worse because obviously Foxdown had been owned by the Borough Council, so we dropped them in it with that particular one. But since then we found out of other ones there. We had a few weeks ago, the Overton Hill development that's just gone through, 120 houses, where despite being effectively an extension to the existing Overton Hill, the developers there saying, no, we're not going to bother. We're going to set up a management company to run this. So we're going to have half the estate with adopted roads run by the council, and with adopted roads, adopted footpaths, adopted play areas and such like. The other half won't be, which is a ridiculous situation. And one of the arguments is they're saying is A, because they couldn't put a loop road in, the county council don't really want to adopt the road because it doesn't sort of go anywhere, but also because they've used sustainable urban drainage systems on there, which of course we're encouraging them to do. They're saying that doesn't make it adoptable, particularly the paved, permeable paving on the roadways. So although it's identical to the existing estate, they won't adopt it. So that's another one we've got in Overton. And we now find the one that's gone through in the neighbourhood plan we sort of voted through effectively earlier. The developer there, who's already got pre-application advice from the council 4 months ago now, and has actually had an exhibition last week. Funnily enough, they want to do exactly the same, have a management company to run it. So we'll have about 500 houses in Overton. Out of the 2,000 we have, we will have at that point, where effectively these people are operating in their own little world. It's not like they don't have a parish council. They can't have any real control over these things. They're particularly the housing association tenants, and with 40% affordable housing, it's getting worse now. So you're getting to a situation where half the people on these estates are totally disenfranchised by this. So this is just getting worse and worse, and it's going to happen more and more. And as we said, as Laura's made the point, the commuted sums isn't helping. Putting them up by 30% a year is not helping the situation. We're not encouraging developers to pass these on to the council for the public good, because it's easier for them to avoid paying the money and make an extra profit on it. And the tragedy is, when we spoke to the developers in one of the estates, they said they didn't even realise what these costs would end up as on the actual residents, because they just saw it as a way of offloading the problem and build the houses and they're away. They weren't even aware. They just said, oh, well, it's like £250 a year. I said, that's that's 2.5 times what the residents are paying to the borough council. to basically live on an estate with little or no grass and a road that isn't adopted. This is just crazy. This isn't double taxation. This is outrageous taxation. So please support this motion. We need to find out what's going on, and we need to try and stop it, because this is we're going to end up in a situation where these people are effectively becoming third-class citizens. And we saw this with the Chapel Hill development. Now, I think I used the phrase, I was on the DC committee. So it's like passport to Pimlico, but the difference is they took control of the area for their own benefit. In this case, other people have control. They don't even know if you can't apply speed limits on these roads. You can't. It's just an absolute mess. We need to get a handle on this and try and get it stopped. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, thank you. I've got no notice of any more speak. Oh, Councillor. Sorry, I understand that Councillor Joe Smith had indicated before, and I missed him. I do apologise. Councillor Joe Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to welcome the motion from all of the council. I think it's something we all broadly agree with, and it's certainly something that's worthwhile for further investigation. It seems to sit most suitably within the Economic Planning and Housing Committee for that investigation, so I'd like as a bit of a pitch to ask for that to come to my committee, and I'd be delighted to add it to the work programme. It's an issue that not just members of the committee but members of the entire council are clearly interested in, so I'd like to invite those members to come to the committee when we discuss it at that point. And with that in mind, Madam Mayor, I'd like to, as I believe we all support the motion, like to look at this and propose that the motion be put to the vote now. I think it's 8.13 in the Constitution, if that helps.
Right, are we all happy to put it to the vote now?
Yeah.
Shall we have a show of hands as those who'd like to put it to the committee? Unanimous again, and thank you very much. Right. Now we come to receive the minutes of the meetings below. Are there any comments on the... Or are we...
Do we agree?
Do we agree? Can we have a show of hands again, just to be sure? Right. Now we go to item 18, which is questions from members of the council that are on notice. Councillor Watts, you've asked a question of the leader. Would you like to do that now? Bearing in mind the time, you might want to do it as read.
As read on the order paper, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. As on the order paper, then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Of course, Councillor Watts raises a very important question, and it's one which I think is being raised almost everywhere you go. What is the effect of Brexit going to be? It was raised today when I was up in Westminster, with them asking me what the effect on Basingstoke was going to be, which was at least encouraging, because they normally ask you what's going on in Basingstoke. And I think the honest answer, and the one which I gave them, is that at the moment nobody knows. It is less than 4 weeks since we had the result of the referendum. And the one thing which I think you do learn as you get to an advanced age, like some of us have reached, is that with a little bit of time passing, a very different perspective comes upon events. And you start to discover that actually what you thought was a tumultuous upheaval in the way that we live actually will cause changes and will cause differences, but it won't be as radical or as difficult as you at first think. So I do think that it's appropriate probably for a little time to pass before we start leaping to conclusions about what the impact might be or might not be. And there's a grave danger that we could all sit around in meetings examining our navels effectively, putting forward all sorts of wonderful suggestions about what might come to pass, but with no evidence base of what is happening or what is going to happen. That said, there's absolutely no reason to have complacency about whether or not there might be an impact on us. There will be an impact on us. Come what may, we will find that some things which we would have done in the past, we'll have to do differently in the future. I think a very good point was made by Councillor Richards earlier on in one of the debates on the motions, that it is terribly easy to sink into a feeling that everything is doom and gloom. We are where we are. We have to make the best of where we are, whether we like it or not. Going on moaning about what the result was is not going to get us anywhere. What we have to do is to look at every aspect of the services that we provide, of the ways that we move forward, of the requirements of our residents, to see if there are changes taking place. And if there are changes taking place, it'll almost become impossible over a period of time to define whether they're taking place because of Brexit, whether they would have happened without Brexit. It doesn't matter. We still have a responsibility to deal with those changing issues now in exactly the same way as we had a responsibility to do that in the past. So that, in response to your question, my view is that nothing would be served by having a special committee to look at the impacts of Brexit. What I do think, however, is that we need to be alert to potential changes which will be taking place. We need to be alert to the impact it particularly will have on some of our businesses, and to make sure that we have the lines of communication to those businesses so that we can get very early warning of when changes are taking place and start to think what we can do about it. We have a committee structure that is perfectly capable of doing that. I'm very happy to ask officers to bring a report when it's an appropriate time, maybe 2-3 months down the road, back on what we know at that time, so that the committees themselves can decide what they would like to look at. But I think that's probably as far as it is reasonable or necessary to go at this stage.
Right, was there a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is the leader... Well, let me say, I mean, members of the government say from time to time the worst thing that can happen is uncertainty, and they seem to think that they're the only certain thing on the planet. But I'm not suggesting a new committee. I suggested a cross-party group, which wouldn't have all the power from an earlier committee. But what is going on is the sort of thing that we're going to be learning collectively, rather than waiting for an officer report. I think this event has turned into a formal committee with an officer report and so on that will, first of all, kick it into the long grass, and secondly, get away from the benefit. How much unanimity has been here tonight that we've all worked together, including the Leavers and the Remainers. I have to say that had Councillors Cubitt and Rattigan been in charge, they would have had a plan, wouldn't they? But I accept that we don't know what's going to happen, but bit by bit things are going to become apparent and we need to have a response.
Can I just ask, is there a question?
So will he reconsider his answer? in the context that until Article 50 is triggered, it's all speculation, but we need to do what's best for Basingstoke and Dean.
Well, of course, not just until Article 50 is triggered, but for the remaining 2 years or however long it takes after that, we remain members of the EU. Nothing changes at that point in time. I hear what he says about wanting to talk about things. I see no point in it actually being done in that way if there are issues, and we are already starting to look, for instance, we're starting the budget process for next year. We are already starting to look at what would be the implications of an interest rate cut on our budget for next year, because it is prudent to do so, because that has already been discussed as a result of the fall in the pound and what might that might follow in August if it didn't come in July. So we're already starting to evaluate these processes. It will happen in every other section of what we do and the activities we have, and it quite rightly needs to be taken into consideration. But just having one big group together is not going to get us anywhere, quite frankly. And if anybody, and I don't really wish to see us trying to change the way we work, when I think the way we work is already very effectively able to take account of these things. So the simple answer to your question, as I think our Prime Minister said to a question only the other day, no.
Thank you. You raised your hand, Councillor Rattigan. Is that because it's a point of order? It's yes, it's not quite how it used to be when it was named, and I have asked for the Constitution to be looked at again, because I do think there's a lot of problems with the Constitution at the moment. Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Rattigan. All right, then I make that we've now finished business, and thank you very much. Thank you for actually quite a good-humoured meeting.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the worship of the Mayor.